The morning sun filtered through the cracked window of Leo's forge, casting long shadows across the dirt floor. Dust motes danced in the beams of light, illuminating the simple tools hanging from the walls, a worn hammer, a pair of tongs, and an anvil that had seen better days. Leo stretched, his muscles aching from another night spent on the straw mattress in the corner. He rubbed his eyes, still trying to process the absurdity of his new reality. 3 weeks had passed since the system apocalypse merged Earth with the fantasy realm. One moment, he'd been a struggling freelance web designer in a cramped apartment, the next, he woke up in this rustic village with a glowing blue screen floating before his eyes, announcing his cheat skill, Divine Artisan's Aura. The description had been maddeningly vague: all crafted items attain world-tier status, with effects scaling to users' intent, or lack thereof. Leo had scoffed at first. A cheat skill? In a world where dragons now soared alongside airplanes and goblins raided convenience stores. All he wanted was a quiet life, maybe run a little blacksmith shop, fix farm tools, and retire early. No epic quests, no world-saving nonsense. Just peace. But the system had other plans. Leo sighed, running a hand through his messy brown hair. He'd spent the first few days in a daze, learning the basics of this new world. The village of Oakhaven was a hodgepodge of old Earth architecture and fantasy elements. Thatched cottages stood next to houses with glowing runes on their doors, and the local tavern served both ale and mana potions. The villagers were a mix of confused humans and cheerful dwarves who'd taken to the merger with surprising gusto. Leo had rented this forge from a grizzled old dwarf named Boren, who'd grumbled about soft humans, but accepted Leo's last few gold coins with a nod. Right, Leo muttered to himself, pushing off the mattress. Today, I fix the fence. Then maybe I can finally get some sleep without worrying about wolves getting into the chicken coop. He'd noticed the fence around his small yard was leaning precariously, a few boards loose where the nails had rusted away. A simple fix, or so he thought. Leo walked over to his workbench, where a small pile of iron ingots sat. He'd traded some repaired tools for them with a traveling merchant, basic materials, nothing fancy. Picking up a hammer and tongs, he placed an ingot in the forge's fire, pumping the bellows until the coals glowed cherry red. As he worked, he couldn't help but think about the skill. Divine Artisan's Aura. It sounded impressive, but so far, it hadn't done anything noticeable. He'd repaired a broken plow for a farmer yesterday, and it seemed fine. Just a regular plow. Maybe the skill was a dud, or maybe it only worked on new creations. Leo shrugged. Better that way, less attention. The iron heated quickly, and Leo pulled it out with the tongs, the metal glowing orange. He placed it on the anvil and began to hammer, the rhythmic clangs echoing in the small space. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he shaped the metal, focusing on the simple task. A nail. Just a plain iron nail, about 4 inches long, with a flat head. He wasn't trying to make anything special, just something to hold wood together. As he worked, he felt a faint warmth in his hands, a tingling sensation he'd come to associate with the skill activating. He ignored it, chalking it up to the heat of the forge. Finally, he quenched the nail in a bucket of water, steam hissing up in a cloud. He held it up, examining it in the light. It looked ordinary. A bit rough around the edges, but serviceable. Perfect, Leo said with a satisfied nod. He grabbed a few more tools and headed outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the nearby forest. Leo's yard was small, with a few scraggly vegetables struggling in a patch of dirt and a chicken coop that housed 2 clucking hens. The fence was indeed a mess, 3 boards had come loose, swinging in the breeze. Leo knelt, positioning the first board back in place. He pulled the nail from his pocket, lined it up, and raised his hammer. Thunk. The nail drove in easily, securing the board. Leo smiled. 1 down, 2 to go. He moved to the next board, repeating the process. As he hammered the second nail, he noticed something odd. The nail he'd just placed began to glow with a soft, golden light. It started at the head and spread down the shaft, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Leo froze, hammer poised in midair. What in the... Before he could react, a notification screen popped up in his vision, bright and intrusive. Item creation complete, nail of unbreakable binding. World tier artifact. Effect: any structure secured with this nail becomes permanently indestructible and immune to all forms of magical or physical decay. Market impact: global enchanted construction market destabilized, prices plummeting by 99.7%. ****. Leo stared, his mouth hanging open. No. No, no, no. This has to be a joke. He reached out, touching the nail. It felt warm, almost alive. The glow intensified, and suddenly, the entire fence began to shimmer. The wood, once weathered and gray, took on a polished, golden hue. The loose boards straightened themselves, and the whole structure seemed to solidify, as if carved from a single piece of immortal oak. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Leo whispered, panic rising in his chest. He backed away, nearly tripping over a chicken. The hens clucked indignantly, scurrying out of his way. He didn't have time to process further. From inside the forge, a series of urgent chimes sounded, the system's alert system, something he'd only heard once before during the initial merger. Leo rushed back inside, his heart pounding. Floating above his anvil was another screen, this one flashing red. Global Economic Alert, Major Market Anomaly Detected. Sector, Enchanted Construction. Event, Sudden Devaluation of all magical building materials and services. Cause traced to New World Tier Artifact Creation, ***. Location, Village of Oakhaven, Blacksmith's Forge. Recommendation, immediate investigation by relevant guilds. Leo sank onto his stool, head in his hands. A nail. I made a stupid nail, and now I've crashed what even is the enchanted construction market? He groaned. This was exactly what he didn't want. Attention. Chaos. And from the sound of it, he'd just bankrupted who knows how many wizards, architects, and magical contractors across the globe. He didn't have long to wallow. Within minutes, the sound of hoofbeats echoed from the village path. Leo peered out the window. 3 riders were approaching at a gallop, their horses lathered with sweat. They wore elaborate robes, one in deep blue embroidered with silver runes, another in green with leaf patterns, and the third in plain gray but with an air of authority. Guild messengers, no doubt. They dismounted outside his forge, their expressions a mix of confusion and fury. Leo took a deep breath, steeling himself. He opened the door just as the blue-robed man raised a fist to knock. The man blinked, taken aback. He was tall, with a sharp face and a beard trimmed to a point. "You are the blacksmith?" he demanded, his voice tight. "That's me," Leo said, trying to sound casual. "Leo. Can I help you?" The green-robed woman stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. She had a scroll in her hand, which she unrolled with a snap. "By order of the United Guilds of Arcane Architecture and Enchanted Engineering, we are here to investigate a catastrophic market disturbance. Our sensors indicate the source is this location." "What have you done?" Leo gestured weakly toward the fence. "I, fix my fence. With a nail." The gray-robed man, older with a stern face, pushed past the others. He walked over to the fence, examining the glowing nail. He touched it gingerly, then jerked his hand back as if shocked. "By the system," he breathed. "It's true. A world-tier artifact. From a nail." He turned to Leo, his eyes wide. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The entire industry relies on selling magical reinforcements, durability spells, and enchanted materials. With this thing in existence, no one will ever need to buy another stability charm again. We're looking at total economic collapse in our sector." Leo held up his hands. "Look, I didn't mean to. I just wanted to keep my chickens safe. It's this stupid skill, Divine Artisan's aura. It makes everything I craft into, well, that." He pointed at the nail. The blue-robed man spluttered. "A cheat skill? And you used it to make a nail? Are you insane? Do you know how many people's livelihoods you've just destroyed? There are guilds in the capital that have spent centuries building their reputations on enchanted construction. Now their stock is worthless." "I'm sorry," Leo said, and he genuinely was. The guilt was starting to set in. "Is there any way to undo it?" The woman shook her head, her expression grim. "World-tier artifacts are permanent. Once created, they can't be destroyed or reversed without catastrophic consequences. The system logs show this is your first creation since the apocalypse. Are you telling us you didn't test this skill before?" "I thought it was broken," Leo exclaimed. "I fixed a plow yesterday, and nothing happened." The older man rubbed his temples. "It likely only activates on new creations, not repairs. A safety feature, perhaps, but poorly implemented. This is a disaster. We need to report back immediately. But first." He fixed Leo with a hard stare. You will come with us. The guild council will want to question you directly. Leo's stomach dropped. Question me? About what? I told you, it was an accident. Accident or not, you've triggered a global economic crisis, the woman said. You're now a person of extreme interest. Either you come willingly, or we'll have to escort you by force. Leo looked around his forge, the simple tools, the straw mattress, the dream of quiet retirement crumbling before his eyes. He sighed, shoulders slumping. Fine. Just let me grab my coat. As he turned to fetch it from a hook, the system alert chimed again, louder this time. A new screen materialized in the center of the room, pulsating with urgent red light. Words scrolled across it, accompanied by a blaring siren that made everyone cover their ears. System-wide alert, market anomaly detected. Source identified, Village Blacksmith, Oakhaven. Threat level, catastrophic. All guilds and governing bodies advised to mobilize. Leo stared at the message, his blood running cold. The three guild messengers exchanged horrified glances. Outside, the sound of more hoofbeats approached, many more, this time, along with the distant shouts of villagers gathering to see what the commotion was about. The older man grabbed Leo's arm, his grip firm. No time for that coat. We need to move now. Before every power in the world descends on this village. But it was too late. Through the open door, Leo could see a crowd forming, not just villagers, but more riders in different colored robes, and even a few figures floating on magical discs. All eyes were on his forge. On him. He'd wanted a quiet life. Instead, he'd become the epicenter of an economic apocalypse with a single nail. And as the system alert continued to blare, echoing across the valley, Leo knew one thing for certain, his retirement plans were officially on hold. The morning after the guild messengers left Oakhaven was unnervingly quiet. Leo stood in his small forge, the scent of cooling iron still hanging in the air, and stared at the empty space where three stern-faced enforcers had demanded answers about his nail. His hands, calloused from years of honest work, trembled slightly as he wiped them on his leather apron. The system alert that had blared across the village, market anomaly detected, source, Village Blacksmith, echoed in his mind like a bad dream. He'd spent the night barricading his door with a spare anvil, half expecting an army to descend at dawn. But no army came. Instead, the sun rose over Oakhaven's thatched roofs, casting long shadows across the muddy lane outside his shop. Birds chirped in the distance, and the distant clang of Old Man Harn's hammer from the next street over suggested the world hadn't ended yet. Maybe, just maybe, the guilds had decided he was a fluke. A one-time accident. Leo allowed himself a sliver of hope as he brewed a weak tea over his forge's embers, the steam curling into the dusty light filtering through his single window. If he could just lay low for a while, maybe they'd forget about him. He could go back to fixing plows and shoeing horses, maybe even take that nap he'd been dreaming of since the system apocalypse merged Earth with this fantasy realm 6 months ago. His hope lasted precisely until mid-morning, when a sharp knock rattled his door. Leo froze, tea halfway to his lips. Had the guilds returned? He crept to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. It wasn't guild enforcers. It was Mrs. Gable, his landlord, a stout woman with a perpetual frown and arms crossed over her flower-print apron. She knocked again, more insistently this time. Leo. I know you're in there. Rent's due, and I won't have any excuses about market crashes or whatever nonsense the town crier's yammering about. Leo sighed, relief and dread mixing in his gut. Rent. Of course. In his panic over the nail incident, he'd completely forgotten that 3 silver coins were due today. He'd spent his last savings on iron ingots last week, assuming he'd make enough from small repairs to cover it. But with the guild sniffing around, business had dried up overnight. No one wanted to be associated with the blacksmith who'd somehow broken the construction market. He opened the door, forcing a smile. Mrs. Gable. Good morning. Is it? She snapped, her eyes narrowing. I heard you had visitors yesterday. Guild types. They didn't look happy. You causing trouble, Leo? No trouble, Leo said quickly, rubbing the back of his neck. Just a misunderstanding. About the rent, could I have a few more days? I've got some commissions lined up. Mrs. Gable's frown deepened. You've been saying that for a week. I need my money, Leo. This isn't a charity. If you can't pay, I'll have to rent the forge to someone else. Maybe that young lad from the capital who's been asking about setting up shop. Panic tightened Leo's chest. Lose his forge. This tiny, smoky workshop was his only refuge, the one place he could pretend retirement was possible. He couldn't go back to wandering the chaotic post-apocalypse wastes. Please, just one more day. I'll have the silver by tomorrow, I promise. Mrs. Gable studied him, then huffed. Fine. Tomorrow. But not a minute later, or you're out. She turned and stomped away, her boots squelching in the mud. Leo closed the door, leaning against it with a groan. One day. He had to make 3 silver coins in one day, without attracting more guild attention. His eyes scanned the forge, the anvil, the bellows, the rack of tools. He could try making nails again, but the memory of the nail of unbreakable binding made him shudder. What if he crafted another world-tier artifact? The system alert had been bad enough, a second one might bring the entire royal guild down on his head. Then his gaze fell on a stack of copper sheets in the corner, left over from a failed attempt at a decorative urn last month. Copper was cheap, easy to work with, and mundane. Surely, a simple copper pot wouldn't trigger his divine artisan's aura. Pots were for cooking, not world-altering magic. He'd made dozens before the apocalypse without incident. Maybe this was the answer, craft something so ordinary that his cheat skill would ignore it. He could sell it to the general store for a few silvers, pay Mrs. Gable, and keep his head down. Decision made, Leo stoked the forge, the flames licking hungrily at the charcoal. He selected a medium-sized sheet of copper, its surface dull and scratched. As he heated it in the fire, his hands moved with practiced ease, the motions ingrained from years at his father's side in their old earth workshop. The heat warmed his face, and for a moment, he could almost forget about guilds and system alerts. This was what he loved, the simple act of creation, the transformation of raw metal into something useful. He hammered the copper into a rounded shape, the rhythmic clangs echoing in the small space. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, focusing on the pot's form, a basic cooking vessel, wide-mouthed and sturdy, with a handle forged from an iron rod. He didn't imbue it with any intent beyond hold soup. No enchantments, no grand designs. Just a pot. But as he finished the final rivet, attaching the handle, a familiar tingling spread through his fingers. It was the same sensation he'd felt when making the nail, a subtle warmth that seemed to seep from his palms into the metal. Leo's heart skipped a beat. No, 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 he muttered, pulling his hands back. But it was too late. The copper pot, resting on his anvil, began to glow with a soft, golden light. It wasn't the harsh glare of magic he'd seen in fantasy tales, it was almost gentle, like sunlight on honey. The scratches on its surface smoothed away, and the metal took on a lustrous sheen, as if polished by invisible hands. A system notification popped into his vision, translucent blue text hovering in the air. Item forged, copper pot. Skill activated, divine artisan's aura. Transformation, world-tier artifact, cauldron of infinite sustenance. Effect, any food or liquid placed within this cauldron becomes infinitely replenishing, never spoils, and grants minor nutritional enhancement. Renders all food-based potions obsolete, ***. Leo stared, mouth agape. Infinite sustenance, he whispered. Obsolete potions? His mind raced. Food potions, healing potions, stamina drafts, even luxury elixirs, were the backbone of the alchemist guild's economy. Every adventurer, soldier, and merchant relied on them. If this cauldron did what it claimed. He reached out tentatively, touching the pot's rim. It was warm, almost alive. In a daze, he filled it with water from his bucket and set it on his small hearth. The water shimmered, and when he dipped a cup in, it refilled instantly, the level never dropping. He tasted it, clean, crisp, with a hint of something energizing. His fatigue from the night's worry seemed to fade slightly. This is bad, Leo said to the empty forge. Very, very bad. But he had no choice. He needed the silver. Wrapping the cauldron in a burlap sack to hide its glow, he hurried to Oakhaven's general store, a cramped building run by a jovial man named Boren. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, the scent of dried herbs and leather filling his nose. Leo. Haven't seen you in a bit, Boren said from behind the counter, polishing a glass jar. Heard you had some excitement yesterday. Nothing exciting, Leo said quickly, setting the sack on the counter. I've got a copper pot for sale. Good quality. Boren unwrapped it, his eyes widening at the sheen. Wow, this is beautiful work. Almost looks enchanted. Where'd you get the copper? Just some leftovers, Leo said, shifting uncomfortably. How much will you give me for it? Boren hefted the pot, examining the seamless joints. I'll give you 5 silvers. It's worth more, but times are tight with all this market talk. 5 silvers. That was more than enough for rent. Leo nodded eagerly. Deal. As Boren counted out the coins, a customer entered, a traveling alchemist in green robes, his belt lined with vials. He glanced at the cauldron, then did a double take. Is that? He stepped closer, peering at the pot. May I? Boren shrugged. Sure, but it's sold. The alchemist touched the cauldron, his fingers tracing the rim. He pulled out a small crystal from his pouch, holding it over the pot. The crystal flashed bright blue. By the gods, he breathed. This is a world-tier artifact. Infinite sustenance. Where did you get this? Leo's blood ran cold. I made it. Just a pot. The alchemist's face paled. You made it? Do you have any idea what this means? Food potions, my entire stock, they're worthless now. Who needs a healing draft when you can have endless, enhancing stew? He turned to Boren. Don't sell this. Destroy it. If word gets out, the Alchemist Guild will be ruined. But it was too late. Boren, seeing an opportunity, had already placed the cauldron on a display shelf with a sign, Miraculous Cooking Pot, tested and verified. News traveled fast in a small village. Within an hour, a crowd had gathered outside the store, villagers marveling as Boren demonstrated the cauldron's powers, filling bowls with endless soup. Laughter and cheers filled the air, but Leo watched from the shadows of his forge, the 5 silvers feeling like lead in his pocket. By afternoon, the first ripple hit. A messenger from the capital arrived on a panting horse, shouting about market crashes in the alchemy district. Potion prices had plummeted by 90% in the last hour, guild vaults were emptying, and panic was spreading. The messenger galloped away, but not before asking where the cauldron had come from. Boren, bless his greedy heart, pointed straight at Leo's forge. Leo spent the rest of the day hiding, listening to the distant sounds of celebration turn to murmurs of concern. As dusk fell, the murmurs became shouts. He peered through his shutters again and saw them, a mob of at least 50 people, marching down the lane toward his shop. They weren't villagers. They wore the green and gold robes of the Alchemist Guild, their faces twisted with anger and fear. Some carried staffs, others clutched worthless potion vials like talismans. At their head was a tall, gaunt man with a pointed beard and a wand that glowed with dangerous green light. The mob surrounded his forge, their torches casting flickering shadows on the walls. Fists pounded on his door, and voices rose in a chaotic chorus, "Come out, blacksmith. You've destroyed our livelihoods. Centuries of tradition, gone." Leo backed away from the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He thought about the nail, the pot, the sheer absurdity of it all. He just wanted to retire. Was that too much to ask? The pounding stopped abruptly. A voice, cold and sharp, cut through the noise. Silence. The crowd parted, and the gaunt man stepped forward, his wand raised. Leo recognized him from guild pamphlets, Master Alaric, High Leader of the Alchemist Guild. His eyes burned with fury as he pointed the glowing wand directly at Leo's door. "Leo the blacksmith." Alaric screamed, his voice trembling with rage. "You've ruined centuries of tradition. You think you can hide in there? We know what you did. That cauldron, it's an abomination. Come out now, or we'll burn this place to the ground." Leo stood frozen, the wand's light seeping through the cracks in the door, painting his face in eerie green. He had no weapons, no escape. Just 5 silvers and a desperate wish for a quiet life. As Alaric's wand began to hum with gathering power, Leo knew his retirement plans were about to go up in flames, literally. The glow from Alaric's wand cast jagged shadows across Leo's forge, illuminating the furious faces of the alchemist mob pressed against the shop's single grimy window. Leo stood frozen, his back against the anvil that had started this whole mess. The air smelled of sulfur from the wand's charging magic and the lingering metallic tang of his earlier creations. "You've ruined centuries of tradition." Alaric's voice cracked through the wooden door, raw with desperation. "Come out and face justice, blacksmith." Leo's mind raced. He'd sold the copper pot, now the cauldron of infinite sustenance, to old man Grant at the general store just yesterday, thinking it would solve his rent problem. Instead, by morning, the entire alchemical industry had collapsed. Potions that once sold for gold pieces were now worthless. The cauldron could produce infinite, perfect food and drink without any magical ingredients. He'd overheard a panicked merchant shouting about how even the royal alchemist had been seen weeping in the capital streets. "Just give me a moment," Leo called out, trying to keep his voice steady. He glanced around his cluttered forge. Scraps of metal littered the floor, leftover iron from the nail, copper shavings from the pot, and, there, in the corner, a small pile of dark, jagged fragments that glimmered with unnatural purple light. Demon core remnants. He'd found them weeks ago while digging a new latrine pit, leftovers from some long-ago battle during the system apocalypse. He'd meant to dispose of them properly, but in his rush to craft the pot, he'd forgotten. Alaric's wand flared brighter. "We're not waiting. You'll craft something to fix this, or we'll burn this shop down with you in it." Leo's hands trembled. He couldn't fight them, his skill was crafting, not combat. And he certainly couldn't craft another world-tier artifact. Or could he? Maybe if he made something small, something simple, something deliberately balanced. The divine artisan's aura had always activated unintentionally before. What if he tried to control it? A wild, desperate hope sparked in his chest. "I'll make something to help," he shouted, grabbing a lump of ordinary tin from his workbench. "A spoon. Just a simple spoon to stir potions better. It'll be balanced, I promise." Silence from outside, then murmurs. Alaric's voice, lower now, "A spoon. You think a spoon can undo the damage? It's worth a try." Leo pleaded. He didn't wait for an answer. His heart hammered against his ribs as he fired up the forge's bellows. The flames roared to life, casting dancing light over the demon core fragments. In his panic, he didn't notice when his sleeve brushed against them, sending one tiny shard skittering toward the tin. Leo worked quickly, his movements practiced from years of pretending to be an ordinary blacksmith. He melted the tin, poured it into a spoon mold, then began shaping it with his tools. As he hammered, he focused all his will on the thought, just a normal spoon. Nothing special. Just a utensil for eating soup. Please don't activate. But the divine artisan's aura had other plans. A soft golden light began to emanate from his hands, seeping into the metal. Leo gasped, trying to pull back, but it was too late. The tin spoon glowed, then shimmered, transforming before his eyes. The metal darkened to obsidian black, etched with intricate purple runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. The bowl of the spoon deepened, becoming a perfect concave mirror that reflected not the forge, but swirling shadows and distant, screaming faces. A name appeared in his mind, whispered by the system itself, "Spoon of Demon King's Essence." "No," Leo whispered, dropping the spoon onto the anvil. It clattered loudly, the sound echoing in the sudden stillness. "No, no, no." Outside, the alchemists fell silent. Then Alaric's voice, trembling, What is that energy? It feels demonic." Leo stared at the spoon. Its description unfolded in his vision, a system notification only he could see, world-tier artifact, Spoon of Demon King's Essence. Crafted from tin and accidental demon core infusion. Properties: can summon and control minor demonic entities, channels the essence of the Demon King, allowing the wielder to taste the despair of fallen realms. Side effect: permanently links to the Demon King's horde, declaring economic war on any market that opposes its existence. Economic war. The words hit Leo like a physical blow. He'd just wanted to make rent. Before he could react, the spoon vibrated, emitting a low hum that shook the very foundations of the forge. Purple energy crackled from it, arcing to the demon core fragments on the floor. They ignited, burning with unholy fire. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and brimstone. "What have you done?" Alaric screamed from outside, his wand's glow flickering uncertainly. Leo didn't answer. He was too busy watching as the shadows in the forge deepened, coalescing into a swirling vortex above the anvil. The spoon rose into the air, suspended by invisible forces. The runes on its handle blazed, and a portal began to form, a tear in reality itself, jagged and black, edged with violet lightning. From within the portal, a voice echoed, deep and resonant, shaking the walls, "Who dares steal the essence of the king?" The alchemists outside scattered, their cries of anger turning to terror. Leo could hear them running, tripping over each other in their haste to flee. Only Alaric remained, his wand now pointed at the portal, his face pale. Leo backed away, his mind screaming at him to run, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. This was worse than the nail. Worse than the cauldron. This wasn't just crashing a market, this was inviting an invasion. The portal stabilized, revealing a glimpse of another realm, a landscape of burning skies and jagged obsidian spires. And stepping through was a figure that made Leo's blood run cold. He was tall, over 7 feet, clad in armor forged from what looked like solidified shadow and broken contracts. His skin was the color of burnt charcoal, etched with glowing red sigils that pulsed with malevolent energy. 2 curved horns swept back from his forehead, and his eyes burned with twin flames of purple and gold. In one hand, he carried a massive ledger, its pages fluttering with lists of debts and acquisitions. In the other, a spear tipped with a screaming soul. He landed in the forge with a thud that cracked the stone floor. The demon general, for that's what he had to be, snarled, revealing teeth like shattered diamonds. His gaze swept the room, lingering on the spoon still floating in the air, then settled on Leo. "Mortals," the demon rumbled, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. "Always meddling with forces beyond their comprehension." Alaric, to his credit, didn't flee. He raised his wand, though it trembled violently. "Demon. Leave this place." The general laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Leave? After your kind has stolen the very essence of our king? That spoon," he pointed a clawed finger at the artifact, "contains fragments of the demon king's hoard soul. Every gem, every coin, every artifact he has collected over millennia, and you've turned it into a utensil." He said the last word with such disgust that Leo flinched. "I didn't mean to." Leo blurted out, his voice squeaking. "It was an accident. I just wanted to make a spoon." The demon general's burning eyes narrowed. "An accident? You expect me to believe that a mortal, in this backwater village, accidentally infused a spoon with enough demonic essence to destabilize the interplanar economy?" He took a step forward, his ledger flipping open. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The Demon King's hoard is the backbone of the underworld's financial system. That spoon has declared war on every market that trades in precious materials. Gold. Worthless. Gems. Trinkets. Dragon hoards." He chuckled darkly. "They'll be next." Leo's mind reeled. Dragon hoards. That sounded familiar from village rumors, but he'd never thought. Alaric lowered his wand slightly, confusion cutting through his fear. "What are you talking about? Demons don't care about economics." "Fool," the general spat. "The system apocalypse merged your world with ours. Did you think only your markets mattered? The Demon King's hoard is tied to the global value of despair, suffering, and rare minerals. That spoon," he gestured again, "has just made all despair-based currencies fluctuate wildly. My king is furious. He wants his essence back." He took another step toward Leo, who scrambled backward until he hit the wall. The spoon drifted between them, still humming. "Give it to me," the general demanded, extending a clawed hand. "And perhaps I'll only destroy this village, instead of plunging your entire continent into an economic depression fueled by demonic inflation." Leo stared at the spoon. If he handed it over, would that fix things? Or would it just give the demons a weapon? His divine artisan's aura had created it, maybe only he could unmake it. But how? He wasn't a mage, he was a blacksmith who wanted to retire. Alaric suddenly spoke up, his voice steadier now. "Blacksmith. If what he says is true, that spoon is affecting markets. Our potions are already worthless. If demonic economics collapse too." He trailed off, the implication clear: total global economic meltdown. Leo swallowed hard. He looked from the demon general's snarling face to Alaric's desperate one, then to the spoon. An idea, stupid and reckless, formed in his mind. "What if," he said slowly, "what if I made something else? To balance it out?" The general laughed again, but this time it was edged with curiosity. "You think you can craft your way out of this? Mortal, your balancing is what caused this mess. But I have to try." Leo insisted, a spark of his old determination returning. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just want to live quietly. If I can make something to stabilize the demonic economy, will you leave us alone?" The general considered, his flaming eyes studying Leo. "You have 1 hour. Craft something that restores value to the Demon King's hoard. If you fail, I will take the spoon by force, and your world will learn what true economic warfare looks like." He snapped his fingers, and the spoon dropped into his waiting hand. He tucked it into his armor, then leaned against the anvil, crossing his arms. "Begin." Leo's heart pounded. 1 hour. To craft something that could fix an interplanar economic crisis. With his skill that turned everything into a world-tier disaster. He looked at Alaric, who gave a faint, helpless nod. Taking a deep breath, Leo turned to his workbench. What could possibly balance demonic essence? Something pure. Something holy. But he had no holy materials. Just ordinary metals, leftover scraps, and the lingering fear in the air. His eyes fell on a small, tarnished silver locket he'd found years ago. It was broken, worthless, but silver was sometimes associated with purity. Maybe. He picked it up, his hands trembling. The demon general watched, unmoving. Alaric stood by the door, wand still raised but now pointing at the floor. As Leo placed the locket on the anvil, he prayed to any god that might be listening. Please, just this once, let me make something normal. Or if not normal, at least not catastrophic. He raised his hammer, and the golden light of the divine artisan's aura began to glow around his hands once more. The demon general's eyes flared with interest. So it's true, he murmured. A mortal with the touch of creation. How amusing. Leo brought the hammer down, and the forge held its breath. The demon general's portal had barely shimmered closed when Leo was already stuffing his meager belongings into a worn leather satchel. His forge, once a sanctuary of quiet retirement, now felt like a cage of impending doom. The air still crackled with the residual energy of the spoon of Demon King's essence, a faint scent of sulfur and despair clinging to the soot-blackened walls. He could still hear the demon general's gravelly voice echoing in his mind, 1 hour, blacksmith. Then we come for you. Leo's hands trembled as he grabbed his trusty hammer and a small pouch of basic metals. He'd managed to buy himself a sliver of time by promising to craft something to restore balance, a laughable notion, given his track record. The silver locket he'd started lay abandoned on his anvil, half-formed and already glowing with an ominous sheen. No, better to run. Maybe in the capital, with the Royal Guild's supposed wisdom, he could explain this mess. Maybe they'd understand he just wanted to fix a fence, make a pot, craft a spoon, not unravel the world's economy. He slipped out the back door as dawn painted the sky in hues of bruised purple and gold. The village of Oakhaven was just stirring, smoke curling from chimneys, the distant clang of another blacksmith's hammer a normal, comforting sound. Leo pulled his hood low, avoiding the main road where Alaric's alchemist mob might still be lurking. Instead, he took the winding forest path toward the capital of Ethelgard, a 3-day journey if he pushed hard. By midday, the dense canopy of ancient oaks and whispering pines enveloped him. Sunlight dappled the mossy ground, and the air was rich with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. For a few blessed moments, Leo allowed himself to breathe. The weight of his skill, the cursed, divine artisan's aura, felt lighter here, away from the chaos of markets and angry guilds. He found a small clearing by a babbling brook and decided to rest. His stomach growled, a reminder that in his haste, he'd forgotten to pack food. Just a quick stop, he muttered to himself, setting down his satchel. Maybe I can forage some berries. But as he rummaged through his bag, his fingers brushed against a lump of iron and a piece of oak wood. An idea sparked, foolish, naive, born of sheer loneliness and a desperate need for normalcy. The Royal Guild was powerful, influential. What if he brought a gift? Something simple, unassuming, to show goodwill. A novelty dagger, perhaps. Not for combat, just a decorative piece. He'd seen travelers sell them in markets, crude things with carved handles, more trinket than tool. Surely, something so mundane couldn't cause another disaster. Could it? Leo's psychological turmoil was a tempest. Part of him screamed to leave the metals alone, to just walk away. But another part, the craftsman's soul that had drawn him to blacksmithing in the first place, itched to create. It had been days since he'd felt the heat of a forge, the satisfying clang of hammer on metal. In this quiet forest, with no one watching, maybe he could make something small. Just to prove to himself he still could, without the world ending. He gathered dry twigs and built a small fire, using his hammer to shape a makeshift anvil from a flat stone. It was crude work, but it would do. The iron was low-grade, scavenged from old wagon wheels, and the oak was from a fallen branch. Leo focused, pouring his frustration and hope into the craft. He heated the iron in the fire until it glowed cherry red, then began to hammer it into a slender blade, about the length of his hand. It was intentionally blunt, with a wavy, decorative edge. For the handle, he carved the oak into a simple grip, etching a pattern of leaves and vines, a tribute to the forest around him. He worked slowly, meticulously, trying to suppress the divine artisan's aura that hummed in his veins like a second heartbeat. Just a novelty, he whispered, sweat beading on his brow. No magic, no world-tier nonsense. Just a pretty knife. As he fitted the blade to the handle, binding it with leather strips, he felt the familiar surge. It started as a tingle in his fingertips, then spread up his arms, a golden light seeping from his pores into the metal. Leo's eyes widened in horror. No, 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 not again. He tried to pull away, but his hands were locked in place, compelled by the skill he could not control. The dagger began to shimmer, the iron transforming into a metal that shone with an inner light, like captured moonlight. The oak handle darkened to ebony, the leaf carvings now glowing with emerald energy. A system notification flashed in his vision, invisible to all but him. World-tier artifact forged, dagger of horde devaluation. Effect: any dragon horde within a 1,000-mile radius is instantly devalued by 90%. Precious metals and gems lose their luster and perceived worth. Dragons experience existential crises regarding the meaning of treasure, ***. Leo dropped the dagger as if it were a live serpent. It landed on the moss, glowing softly, innocently. What have I done? He groaned, burying his face in his hands. He'd just wanted a gift, a stupid, harmless gift. Now he'd somehow attacked dragonkind's entire economic system. He remembered stories of dragons, those majestic, terrifying beings who slept on mountains of gold. What would they do when their wealth turned to, well, still gold, but suddenly considered worthless? He didn't have to wait long to find out. The sky, which had been a clear blue, darkened in an instant. Not with clouds, but with a shadow so vast it blotted out the sun. A roar echoed through the forest, a sound of such profound anguish that it shook the trees to their roots. Birds scattered in panic, and small animals burrowed deep into the earth. Leo looked up, his blood running cold. Descending from the heavens was a dragon. But not the fierce, fire-breathing monster of legend. This one was colossal, scales the color of molten gold, with wings that spanned the width of the clearing. Yet, its posture was slumped, its great head bowed. As it landed, the ground trembled, and Leo stumbled back, clutching his satchel. The dragon's eyes, each the size of a wagon wheel, were filled with tears. Actual, glittering tears that dripped onto the moss, sizzling slightly. "You," the dragon rumbled, its voice a deep, resonant bass that vibrated in Leo's bones. It spoke the common tongue, though with a gravelly, ancient accent. "You are the source." I felt it, the sudden emptiness in my heart. My hoard, my beautiful, glittering hoard, it's worthless. The dragon's voice cracked on the last word, and a fresh torrent of tears streamed down its scaled cheeks. Leo stood frozen, his mind racing. This was the Dragon Emperor. He'd heard tales, the sovereign of all dragonkind, who ruled from a mountain of treasure so vast it could buy kingdoms. And here he was, weeping in a forest clearing because of a novelty dagger. I'm sorry, Leo stammered, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. I didn't mean to. It was just a gift. For the Royal Guild. I'm trying to get to the capital to explain. Explain? The Dragon Emperor interrupted, his voice rising to a roar that made Leo's ears ring. You have explained enough with your cursed craft. For millennia, we dragons have curated our hoards. It is our art, our passion, our very soul. Gold, gems, artifacts of power, each piece tells a story. And now, because of your trinket. He gestured a massive claw toward the glowing dagger on the ground. The value is gone. My rubies look like common glass. My platinum feels like lead. I flew over the Silver Peak Mountains on my way here, and my cousins are weeping into their piles of suddenly mundane treasure. Leo swallowed hard, his throat dry. It's devalued by 90%, not entirely worthless, he offered weakly, immediately regretting it. The Dragon Emperor's eyes narrowed, flames flickering in their depths. Do not mock me, mortal. In dragon economics, perception is everything. If we believe our hoards are worthless, then they are. And we believe it, because your artifact forces that belief upon us. It's an existential horror. He leaned in closer, his breath hot enough to wilt the nearby ferns. I have bankrupted my entire species in minutes. Do you know what this means? Dragons are now poor. Poor. We'll have to take up jobs. Maybe mining. But mining for what? More worthless gold. Leo's mind whirled with absurd images of dragons in tiny hard hats, digging ditches. He shook his head to clear it. What can I do? I didn't ask for this power. I just want to retire. Retire, the Dragon Emperor scoffed, a tear splashing near Leo's feet. You retire when my hoard is restored. Forge me something to fix this. Something that will make treasure precious again. Or so help me, I will melt your village, what's left of it after the alchemists and demons are through, into a puddle of slag. He roared again, the sound filled with such despair and fury that Leo felt it in his teeth. The cliffhanger hung in the air, thick with tension. Leo stared at the weeping Dragon Emperor, then at the glowing dagger, then at his own hands, the hands that had caused this. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard the faint echo of demonic laughter, a reminder that his hour was nearly up. The capital seemed farther away than ever, and now he had a dragon demanding a solution. He took a deep breath, the weight of the world's economy, and now dragonkind's sanity, resting squarely on his shoulders. All right, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I'll try. But you have to understand, it might not go as planned. The Dragon Emperor sniffled, wiping a tear with a claw. Just make it stop hurting, blacksmith. Make the gold shine again. And as Leo knelt to pick up his hammer, the forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next accidental catastrophe to unfold. The capital city of Ethelgard rose before Leo like a mountain of marble and magic, its spires piercing the low-hanging clouds that perpetually swirled with residual system energy. After his encounter with the weeping Dragon Emperor, whose roars still echoed in his nightmares, Leo had trudged the remaining miles with the desperate hope that someone, anyone, in this seat of human power might understand his plight. He wanted retirement, not revolution. A quiet forge, not world-altering artifacts. But as he passed through the massive gates, carved with runes that shimmered with protective enchantments, he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. Whispers followed his dusty, travel-worn form. Is that him? The blacksmith from the reports. The one who crashed the construction market with a nail. They say he made dragons cry. Leo ignored them, focusing on the grand avenue that led to the Royal Guildhall. The buildings here were a chaotic blend of earthly architecture and fantasy absurdity. A bank with dragon-scale shingles stood next to a cafe where floating teacups served themselves. Market stalls displayed everything from glowing potions to smartphones that now ran on mana crystals. The air smelled of ozone, roasted chestnuts, and the faint, metallic tang of the system's interface. His heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and fragile hope. Maybe the Royal Guild, with their scholars and administrators, could help him control his skill. Or better yet, remove it entirely. He never saw the capture coming. As he rounded a corner into a narrower street, shadowed by overhanging balconies, 4 figures in tailored silk robes stepped from a doorway. They moved with the practiced grace of predators, their eyes sharp with calculation. Before Leo could protest, a gloved hand clamped over his mouth, and another pressed a cold, enchanted disc against his neck. A jolt of paralyzing magic surged through him, not enough to harm, but sufficient to lock his muscles. His thoughts screamed in protest. Not again. I just wanted to talk. Quietly now, murmured a smooth voice. The speaker was a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes the color of polished copper coins. He wore a robe embroidered with intricate gold threads that depicted scales and coins. We are the Merchants Guild, Leo. And you, my friend, are worth more than all the platinum in the vaults. Leo tried to struggle, but the magic held him fast. They dragged him through a hidden side entrance into a building that smelled of incense and old parchment. The interior was opulent yet sterile, polished mahogany floors, walls lined with ledgers and glowing financial charts, and a central room dominated by a massive, circular table. Above it, a holographic stock market ticker scrolled with dizzying speed, displaying commodity prices from across the merged world: Dragon Gold, 90% devaluation, see Chapter 4, Enchanted Timber, recovering slowly, Platinum, volatile, seek advice. They sat him in a high-backed chair, the paralysis fading just enough to allow movement but not escape. The copper-eyed man took a seat opposite him, steepling his fingers. I am Guildmaster Silas, he said, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. We've been monitoring your activities. The nail, the cauldron, the dagger. Fascinating, really. Each one a masterpiece of unintended consequence. Leo rubbed his neck, glaring. I don't want trouble. I just want to retire. Silas chuckled, a dry, papery sound. Retirement? Oh, Leo. You don't retire from being a force of nature. You are a walking economic stimulus, or catastrophe, depending on one's perspective. And right now, the platinum market is in turmoil. Too many adventurers hoarding it for enchantments, not enough circulating. The exchange rate is fluctuating wildly, threatening to destabilize trade across 3 continents. A younger guild member, a woman with sharp features and a tablet glowing with data, leaned in. Our models show a 40% chance of a platinum crash within the week. It could trigger a cascade failure in magical infrastructure. Silas nodded. So, here is our proposal. You will craft an item for us. Something deliberately mediocre. A meh quality sword, as it were. With your divine artisan's aura, we believe it will become an artifact that stabilizes the platinum market, perhaps by regulating its flow or enhancing its properties. We've studied the patterns. Your creations address systemic imbalances, albeit chaotically. We aim to harness that. Leo's stomach churned. Every time he tried to craft something simple, it backfired spectacularly. The spoon that attracted demons, the dagger that bankrupted dragons. And if I refuse, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Silas's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then we inform the Royal Guild that you are a rogue element deliberately sabotaging the economy. They will lock you in a dungeon so deep even the system might forget you. Or worse, they'll put you in a crafting coma, force you to produce artifacts until your mind breaks. We, however, offer partnership. Do this one task, and we will ensure you have a quiet forge somewhere remote. With guards to keep the alchemists and dragons away. The offer was a gilded cage, but Leo saw no alternative. He thought of his village, threatened by the Dragon Emperor's rage. At least here, there was a slim chance of control. Fine, he muttered, the word tasting like ash. But I need a forge. And materials. Nothing fancy. Silas clapped his hands. Excellent. We have a private workshop prepared. Follow me. They led him to a basement chamber that was a blacksmith's dream, or nightmare. It was too clean, too organized. The forge burned with enchanted blue flames that required no bellows. The anvil was made of smoothed silverstone, gleaming under mage-light orbs. Tools hung in precise rows, each labeled. It felt sterile, devoid of the soul and grit of a real workshop. Leo's hands itched with unease. We procured standard steel ingots, Silas said, gesturing to a stack. And a handle of oak. No enchantments, no rare materials. Just a simple sword. Make it unremarkable. Leo approached the forge, his mind racing. How does one craft meh? He'd spent his life striving for quality, even before the system apocalypse. Now, he had to intentionally make something average, hoping his aura would twist it into a market stabilizer. He took a deep breath, the heat of the flames washing over him. As he lifted a hammer, he focused on mundane thoughts. This is just a sword. It will cut things. Maybe hang on a wall. Nothing special. He worked slowly, deliberately avoiding any flourish. The steel heated, was pounded into a basic blade shape, quenched in water that hissed loudly in the quiet room. He ground the edges to a serviceable sharpness, attached the oak handle with plain rivets. No runes, no decorative etching. It was, by any measure, a perfectly ordinary sword, the kind a militia recruit might carry. As he finished, he held it up. Done, he said, his voice flat. For a moment, nothing happened. Leo dared to hope. Maybe his aura had finally tired of the joke. Then, a familiar golden glow emanated from the blade, starting at the hilt and spreading like liquid light. The air hummed with energy. The guild members stepped back, eyes wide with a mix of fear and greed. The sword trembled in Leo's grip, and words etched themselves into the steel, glowing with divine script, sort of economic equilibrium. Silas snatched it from him, his hands trembling with excitement. Yes. Perfect. Now, to test it. He carried the sword into the main chamber, Leo dragged along by the guards. The guildmaster placed the blade on the central table, beneath the holographic ticker. According to our theories, it should emit a stabilizing field, regulating platinum values. The ticker flickered. Platinum prices, which had been jumping between 50 and 200 gold coins per ounce, suddenly froze at 100. A collective sigh of relief swept the room. Silas beamed. You see. Control. We can direct your power. But Leo felt a deep dread. His creations never worked as intended. The glow from the sword intensified, pulsing in rhythm with the ticker. Then, the numbers began to change, not stabilizing, but oscillating wildly. 100, 500, 10, 1000, 1. The fluctuations grew faster, a blur of digits. Alarms blared from the walls, magical sigils flashing red. The holographic charts twisted into chaotic spirals. What's happening? Silas shouted, his composure shattered. The woman with the tablet stared, horrified. It's not stabilizing. It's amplifying all market volatility. Platinum, gold, even mundane goods like wheat, their values are swinging by thousands of %. The sword is creating feedback loops in the system's economic algorithms. Outside, through the windows, they could hear rising panic. Cries from the streets, the clatter of collapsing market stalls. A vendor's cart of apples suddenly burst into flames as its value momentarily spiked to that of Dragon Horde gems. In the room, the ticker now scrolled too fast to read, a waterfall of numbers ending in a single, blinking message, crash imminent. Silas's face turned pale, the color draining until he looked like a ghost. He dropped the sword as if it were white-hot. It clattered on the table, still glowing with malevolent energy. You've done it again, he whispered, his voice trembling. You haven't fixed anything. You've made it worse. Leo slumped in his chair, despair washing over him. He had tried to comply, to be controlled, and still, chaos followed. The guild members scrambled, shouting orders to sell assets, to shut down exchanges, but it was too late. The sword of economic equilibrium pulsed once more, and the ticker froze on a final, devastating number, a negative value for platinum. The room fell silent, save for the distant sounds of economic collapse. Silas turned to Leo, his eyes wide with terror and fury. What have you brought upon us? But Leo had no answer. He only stared at the sword, knowing that his hope for retirement had just been cut down, not by dragons or demons, but by the very markets he kept unintentionally destroying. The Merchants Guild's opulent chamber had descended into pandemonium. Stock tickers lining the marble walls flashed crimson warnings, crash imminent, platinum minus 95%, grain futures null, while guild members scrambled like ants in a disturbed nest. Guildmaster Silas, his face the color of bleached parchment, clutched the sword of economic equilibrium, as if it were a venomous serpent. The blade hummed with a faint, discordant energy, its steel surface shimmering with phantom numbers that danced and vanished like market indices in freefall. Leo slumped against the cold stone wall of the workshop, the sterile scent of enchanted cleaning spells doing little to mask his despair. His hands, calloused from a lifetime of honest labor, felt alien to him now, tools of accidental apocalypse rather than creation. Another one, he muttered to himself, watching as a junior merchant fainted at a terminal showing Dragon Horde derivatives evaporating into theoretical dust. I just wanted to fix a fence. Now I'm crashing reality's stock market. Before the chaos could escalate further, the air in the chamber rippled. A vertical slit of silver light tore through space near the guild's ornate double doors, widening into a shimmering portal. Through it stepped a woman clad in austere grey robes, her appearance so unremarkable it was jarring, medium height, brown hair tied in a severe bun, features that seemed to blur if you looked too closely. Only her eyes held any distinction, pupils that swirled with faint, scrolling lines of system code, glowing with soft blue light. Cease all activity, she announced, her voice calm yet carrying through the room like a command prompt. By authority of System Administration, Sector Gamma, 7, I am Administrator Kayla. This location has been flagged for reality instability. The guild members froze. Silas dropped the sword with a clatter, backing away as if burned. Administrator. Thank the gods, this blacksmith, he's. I am aware, Kayla interrupted, her code-filled eyes locking onto Leo. Leonardo Verez, known as Leo. Holder of the anomalous skill, Divine Artisan's aura. Come with me. She didn't wait for agreement. With a flick of her wrist, the portal expanded, enveloping Leo in a sensation of static electricity and weightlessness. When his vision cleared, they stood not in another guild hall, but in a space that defied conventional geometry, a room of pure white, stretching to infinity in all directions, with no visible walls or ceiling. Floating in the center was a simple wooden table and 2 chairs. The only sound was a low hum, like distant servers processing unimaginable data. Where are we? Leo asked, his voice echoing strangely. A neutral subspace, Kayla replied, gesturing for him to sit. Isolated from market fluctuations and guild politics. I've been monitoring your creation since the nail of unbreakable binding. Each one has triggered cascading reality glitches. She produced a translucent screen from thin air, tapping it to display holographic records. Leo saw his own forge back in the village, the simple iron nail glowing with golden light as it transformed. Then the copper pot boiling over with endless stew, the novelty dagger gleaming with dragon gold essence, and finally the sword he'd just crafted, its energy rippling through economic charts like a tsunami. Your skill isn't just creating powerful items, Kayla explained, her tone clinical. It's overriding fundamental system parameters. The nail didn't just bind wood, it redefined durability across all construction enchantments, collapsing their value. The cauldron rewrote sustenance algorithms, making potions redundant. The sword. She zoomed in on its data stream. It's attempting to enforce equilibrium by randomly reassigning value. Platinum isn't crashing, it's being redistributed to turnip futures in another dimension. Leo stared, his mind reeling. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to retire quietly. Be a village blacksmith, maybe fix some tools, take naps. Your intent is irrelevant, Kayla said, though a flicker of something, pity, crossed her coated eyes. The system merged Earth and fantasy realms imperfectly. Your skill appears to be a bug that interacts with the crafting subsystem, elevating any item to world tier by tapping into unresolved cosmic variables. Each creation introduces contradictions, like trying to run two conflicting operating systems at once. She showed him another projection, a map of reality, with glowing red cracks spreading from his village outward. Glitches are manifesting. In the capital, merchants reported seeing gold coins turn into leaves mid-transaction. In dragon territories, hordes are briefly appearing as abstract concepts rather than physical objects. If this continues, the fabric of merged reality could unravel. Leo sank into the chair, the weight of it all crushing him. So what do I do? Stop crafting forever? That would be optimal, but your skill is passive, Kayla said. Merely touching tools might trigger it. However, there is a precedent. The system has arbitration protocols for divine-level disputes. If you formally retire, create a binding contract to cease all crafting, it might quarantine the anomaly. Hope, fragile and desperate, sparked in Leo's chest. A retirement contract? I can do that. I've drafted plenty for old smiths back home. Do it here, Kayla instructed, materializing a quill, ink, and parchment on the table. The subspace will contain any transformations. Leo took a deep breath, focusing on the simple act of writing, something that had never triggered his aura before. He dipped the quill, his hand steadying as he recalled the straightforward language of village agreements. I, Leonardo Verez, hereby declare my retirement from all blacksmithing and crafting endeavors, effective immediately. I relinquish any claim to my skills and vow to never again forge, mend, or alter any item, metal or otherwise. As he signed his name with a flourish, the parchment began to glow. Not the gentle light of enchantment, but a brilliant, blinding gold that filled the white space. Leo's heart sank. No, not again. The contract lifted from the table, hovering mid-air as words rewritten themselves in shimmering divine script. The title now read, Contract of Divine Arbitration. Below, clauses had transformed. Disputes arising from the retiree's prior crafts shall be mediated by appointed divine beings, with jurisdiction over mortal and cosmic economies. Kayla's calm facade shattered. That's not a retirement contract. You've just invoked the Pantheon's legal subsystem. Before she could intervene, the parchment exploded into 3 beams of light, each striking the empty space around them. The white subspace warped, colors bleeding into existence, first a deep, star-studded violet, then a vibrant emerald green, and finally a harsh, metallic bronze. From these patches of altered reality, 3 figures materialized. To the left stood a being of elegant grace, clad in robes woven from starlight and shadow. Her face was serene, with eyes that held swirling galaxies. I am Seraphina, goddess of cosmic balance and trade, she announced, her voice like chiming bells. This contract falls under my purview of economic harmony. To the right emerged a muscular figure armored in living oak and bronze, a hammer slung at his belt. I am Torvin, god of craftsmanship and labor, he boomed, sparks flying from his beard with each word. Any dispute involving a blacksmith's retirement is mine to judge. Between them, a third being appeared, a slender figure in scholar's robes, holding a ledger that glowed with endless numbers. I am Algor, deity of systems and logic, they stated flatly, their voice devoid of inflection. The anomaly stems from system malfunction. Jurisdiction is clearly administrative. Leo stared, dumbfounded, as the 3 gods immediately began arguing. His crafts affect markets across realms. Serafina insisted, gesturing at Leo. That nail destabilized celestial construction budgets. But it was forged by his hand. Torvin countered, slamming his hammer against his palm for emphasis. The art of the smith is sacred, his retirement must be honored with proper rites. Irrelevant, Algor interjected, tapping their ledger. The core issue is system integrity. My analysis shows a 99.7% probability of reality collapse if his skill remains unpatched. This is a technical matter. Technical? Serafina scoffed. Your patches would cause hyperinflation in the divine treasury. Better than your balance proposals. Last time you adjusted interest rates, we had a soul shortage in the afterlife. Torvin roared. The argument escalated, their divine auras clashing in the subspace. Serafina's starlight swirled into economic charts that floated around her, Torvin's hammer strikes created shockwaves of crafting runes, and Algor's ledger projected streams of error codes that tangled with both. The white room trembled, cracks appearing in the nothingness. Kayla stepped back, her coated eyes wide with alarm. This is worse than I predicted. Divine arbitration protocols haven't been invoked since the merger. Their dispute could tear this subspace apart. Leo watched, a strange numbness settling over him. After the nail, the pot, the dagger, the sword, now gods were fighting over his retirement paperwork. He thought of his quiet village, the simple forge he'd built with his own hands, the naps in the afternoon sun that seemed a lifetime ago. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. I just wanted to retire, he whispered to no one. Was that too much to ask? But the gods didn't hear him. Serafina was now summoning constellations to illustrate trade deficits, Torvin was forging a miniature anvil to demonstrate proper retirement ceremonies, and Algor was reciting system regulations in a monotone that somehow drowned out both. The contract of divine arbitration floated above them, pulsing with golden light, binding them to a dispute with no clear resolution, and Leo trapped at its center. As the subspace shuddered again, a single thought crystallized in Leo's mind: retirement wasn't just impossible. It was a divine-level catastrophe. The subspace where the gods argued was unraveling at the seams. Serafina's cosmic scales tipped wildly, Torvin's anvil hammered against Algor's glowing data streams, and the very air crackled with divine discord. Leo, crouched behind a shimmering barrier of contract parchment that had somehow hardened into a protective shell, felt a headache brewing that had nothing to do with the metaphysical chaos. I invoke Clause 7.3. Algor boomed, his form flickering with system errors. This blacksmith's skill is a bug. My jurisdiction. Bug or masterpiece, it is craft. Torvin retorted, sparks flying from his beard. Mine to oversee. And mine to balance before you two collapse reality. Serafina shrieked, her voice echoing like a dying star. Leo sighed, rubbing his temples. His retirement contract, meant to be a simple, Leo, hereby retire from blacksmithing, had morphed into the contract of divine arbitration, a glowing scroll that now bound 3 bickering deities to mediate his disputes. All he'd wanted was a nap. Instead, he had front-row seats to a divine turf war. Just as the subspace walls began to pixelate, a slender figure slipped through a crack in reality. A man in a tailored suit, incongruous amidst the chaos, with spectacles perched on his nose and a clipboard in hand. He dodged a stray bolt of cosmic energy and skidded to Leo's side. Leo, the village blacksmith, the man asked, voice calm despite the apocalypse around them. Unfortunately, Leo muttered. Who are you? Another guild lackey? Felix, rogue economist. Formerly of the Royal Guild's Market Oversight Division. I've been tracking your economic disruptions. Felix adjusted his glasses, eyeing the arguing gods with academic interest. Fascinating. Divine arbitration triggered by a retirement clause. The paperwork alone would crash a lesser system. Great. Can you get me out of here? I just want to go somewhere quiet and not craft anything ever again. Felix smiled, a sharp, calculating expression. I can do better. I see you not as a calamity, but as a tool for radical market reform. The current system is bloated, inefficient. Your creations, they reset paradigms. Come with me. I have a safe house in the remote Frost Peak Mountains. No guilds, no gods, just peace and quiet. Leo hesitated. The gods were now debating whether Leo's aura fell under artisan oversight or cosmic anomaly mitigation. Serafina had started crying literal stardust. Any port in a storm. Fine. But no crafting. I'm retired. Of course, Felix said, pulling a small device from his pocket. Teleportation token, a bureaucratic bypass, he explained, for emergencies when paperwork gets too heavy. He tapped it, and with a pop that sounded suspiciously like a rubber stamp, they vanished. The Frostpeak Mountains were a jagged expanse of snow-capped peaks and pine forests, so remote that the system's notifications arrived days late. Felix's safe house was a cozy log cabin nestled in a valley, with a smoking chimney and a view that stretched for miles of untouched wilderness. For the first time in weeks, Leo breathed air that didn't smell of panic or molten platinum. Home sweet home, Felix said, gesturing grandly. Fully stocked. No neighbors for 50 miles. And most importantly, warded against divine detection, courtesy of some creative loan agreements with a few celestial beings. Leo dropped his meager bag, containing a change of clothes, a half-eaten sandwich, and a still-glowing contract of divine arbitration, now rolled up and tied with a string that seemed to hum with restrained arguments. Thanks. I mean it. But I'm serious about no crafting. My aura, it's cursed. Understood, Felix said, though his eyes gleamed with that economist's zeal. Rest up. I'll prepare dinner. We have much to discuss about market theory over stew. For 2 days, Leo did nothing but sleep, eat, and stare at the mountains. It was blissful. Felix proved a decent host, if prone to rambling about supply-side shocks and the inherent instability of Dragon Horde-based currencies. Leo tuned most of it out, savoring the silence. On the third morning, however, a problem arose. Leo, Felix said over breakfast, I've been reviewing the cabin's inventory. We're short on shelter for extended stays. The spare room's fine, but if we have guests, or need to hide from another guild, we should be prepared. I have some basic camping gear in storage, but the tent is torn. A simple repair, really. Could you? Leo froze, a spoonful of oatmeal halfway to his mouth. No. No crafting. Not even a repair. You saw what happened with the nail, the pot, the spoon, the sword, the contract. But this is just mending. A few stitches on canvas. Your aura triggers on creation, yes. Repair is maintenance, not creation. Surely it's safe. Felix's voice was reasonable, persuasive. Think of it as patching a hole. No different from darning a sock. Leo's resolve wavered. The mountain nights were cold, and Felix had a point. Maybe small repairs were inert. He'd never tried before, everything he'd touched had been forged or drafted from scratch. A tentative hope flickered. All right. But just stitches. No tools. I'll do it by hand. Felix beamed, fetching the tent from a closet. It was a simple, weathered canvas thing, with a large rip along one seam. Leo sat by the fireplace, needle and thread in hand. He focused on the mundane, pushed the needle through, pulled the thread tight. No grand designs, no skill activation. Just a repair. But as his fingers brushed the canvas, a familiar warmth spread from his palms. The divine artisan's aura, dormant but ever-present, stirred. Leo gasped, trying to pull back, but it was too late. The thread glowed gold. The needle shimmered. The tent fabric rippled as if alive. No, no, no. Leo cried, dropping it, but the transformation was already underway. The canvas billowed, expanding beyond the cabin's walls, colors shifting to a deep, starry blue. Seams reforged themselves with threads of spatial energy. Poles straightened into crystalline structures. A label materialized on the flap, Tent of Infinite Space. Felix stared, clipboard forgotten. Remarkable. A tent with, is that an internal pocket dimension? Leo, do you realize what this means? Dimensional storage is a multi-billion gold industry. Guilds charge exorbitant fees for even a cubic foot of extra-dimensional space. This tent, it looks like it can hold, well, anything. Leo groaned, burying his face in his hands. I just wanted to fix a tear. What does it do? Felix, ever the analyst, poked his head inside the tent flap. His voice echoed back, distorted. It's vast. I can see forests, mountains, a small ocean in the distance. It seems to generate space on demand. Infinite storage, potentially. And it's portable. This will make dimensional storage items, bags, rings, vaults, obsolete overnight. As if on cue, a tremor ran through the cabin. Outside, the sky flickered with unnatural lights. Portals ripped open in the valley, disgorging figures in robes adorned with pocket symbols that glowed with unstable magic. Dimensional mages, their faces pale with panic, teleported in by the dozen. Their pockets, once prized, bags of holding, and spatial pouches, were now emitting sparks and erratic hums. One mage, an elderly man with a beard woven with tiny stars, staggered forward, clutching a smoking bag. "You! Blacksmith! What have you done? My bag of 1,000 realms just imploded. The entire dimensional storage market has crashed. Prices are in freefall. My life's work, gone." Another, a younger woman with pockets that flickered like bad holograms, yelled, "The tent of infinite space, system alerts are calling it a world-tier artifact. It's overriding all spatial enchantments. Our magic is unraveling." Felix stepped outside, raising his hands placatingly. Now, good mages. This is an opportunity. Think of the efficiency. No more storage limits. The market will adapt." "Adapt?" the elder mage shrieked. "My guild's vaults are collapsing into themselves. We're losing centuries of artifacts. Stop him before he crafts anything else." Leo backed into the cabin, the tent now ominously folded into a small, weightless bundle in his hand. He could feel it pulsing with infinite potential. Felix joined him, locking the door as the mages began chanting, their unstable pockets flaring with dangerous energy. "Well," Felix said, adjusting his glasses with a shaky hand, "that escalated quickly. But look on the bright side, your repair worked perfectly." "This isn't funny," Leo hissed. "How do we get out of here? They'll tear this place apart." Felix tapped his chin. "The tent. It's infinite space. We could hide inside it until they leave. And live in a pocket dimension forever. No thanks. Besides, what if it collapses with us in it?" Leo's mind raced. The contract of divine arbitration, in his bag hummed louder, as if sensing the dispute. He could almost hear the gods arguing from within. Maybe we can use the contract. Call the gods back. They love mediating." "Too risky," Felix said. "They might side with the mages. Or worse, start another reality-warping debate. No, we need a distraction." He peered out the window. The mages were forming a circle, their glowing pockets sinking into an unstable network. "They're preparing a spatial lock spell. Once that's cast, no teleportation in or out." Leo looked at the tent bundle. An idea, desperate and stupid, formed. What if we give them the tent? Let them have it. Maybe it'll stabilize things. Felix shook his head. "It's bonded to you, Leo. Your aura created it. It'll likely just cause more chaos in their hands. But, we could use it as a bargaining chip. Offer to modify it. Make it less disruptive." "Modify? You mean craft again? Are you insane? It's either that or become permanent residents of a mountain cabin surrounded by angry mages with exploding pockets." Outside, the mages' chanting reached a crescendo. The air thickened, pressing against the cabin walls. Leo's hands trembled. He'd come here for peace, and instead, he'd crashed another market. The tent felt heavy with irony. He took a deep breath. "Fine. But if I try to modify this thing, it'll probably turn into a tent of reality's end, or something." He unfolded the tent, laying it on the floor. It shimmered, its interior visible as a swirling galaxy of space. Leo focused, not on crafting, but on limitation. He imagined the tent having a finite size, a reasonable storage capacity. He willed his aura to dial it back. But the aura, ever enthusiastic, responded with a surge of power. The tent glowed brighter, and new runes appeared along its seams, capacity, infinite. Subdimensions, unlimited. Rent, due monthly to divine landlord. "Oh, come on!" Leo yelled. "Now it has a landlord?" Felix paled. "That's not good. The divine arbitration might have extended to property rights." Before they could react, the cabin door blasted inward. The dimensional mages stood there, their pockets now glowing with a coordinated, unstable magic. The elder mage pointed a trembling finger at the tent. "Hand it over, blacksmith. Before our pockets detonate and take this mountain with them." Leo stood, holding the tent like a shield. "It won't help. It's just making things worse. But the mages weren't listening. Their pockets pulsed in unison, the unstable magic reaching a critical mass. The air crackled with spatial distortions, and the very ground seemed to warp. Felix grabbed Leo's arm. Into the tent. Now. It's our only chance. They dove through the flap, into the infinite space within, just as the mage's spell erupted outside. The last thing Leo saw was the cabin dissolving into a kaleidoscope of fractured dimensions, and the mage's pockets glowing with an apocalyptic light, ready to unleash chaos upon the world. The infinite expanse of the tent's interior was both a sanctuary and a prison. Leo stood on what felt like solid ground, though it was merely the fabric of the tent floor stretched into an impossible plane, and stared at the swirling, star-like lights in the distance. Beside him, Felix was frantically scribbling notes on a scrap of parchment, his economist's mind racing to calculate the market implications of infinite storage. "We can't stay here forever," Leo said, his voice echoing oddly in the vast space. "Those mages outside, their magic is destabilizing. If it explodes, will it even reach us in here?" Felix looked up, his glasses askew. "Unclear. The tent of infinite space seems to exist in a pocket dimension. But if their spell causes a dimensional rupture, it might tear through. We need to." Before he could finish, the fabric of the tent rippled. A section of the sky shimmered, and a familiar, massive form began to materialize. Scales the color of molten gold, wings that could blot out the sun, and eyes like burning coals, the Dragon Emperor had returned. Leo stumbled back, nearly tripping over a non-existent rock. "You again. How did you find us?" The Dragon Emperor landed with a soft thud that shouldn't have been possible in this space, his bulk somehow fitting without straining the tent's limits. He folded his wings, and his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I am a dragon. I have my ways. And you, little blacksmith, have not yet fixed my hoard." Felix stepped forward, holding up his hands placatingly. "Your Majesty, we're in a bit of a situation. Dimensional mages are outside trying to kill us over this tent." "I am aware," the dragon said, his snout curling in what might have been a smirk. "I dealt with them. They are currently indisposed. Frozen in a temporal stasis spell. It will last long enough for us to talk." Leo blinked. "You froze them? Why help us?" The Dragon Emperor's expression shifted to something weary, almost pleading. "Because my treasure is still worthless. Ever since you forged that dagger, the one you called a novelty, the value of dragon hoards has plummeted by 90%. Gems, gold, artifacts, they are now as common as pebbles in the eyes of the market. My kin are in despair. We have spent millennia collecting, and now our life's work is mocked." He lowered his head, his massive eyes level with Leo's. "I offer a truce. Forge me an item, something simple, nothing extravagant, that will restore value to our hoards. Do this, and I will grant you protection. No more guilds, no more angry alchemists or divine beings. I will shield you in my mountain lair, where you can retire in peace." Leo's heart leapt at the word retire. Peace. Quiet. No more economic disasters. But his mind screamed caution. Every time he tried to craft something simple, it backfired spectacularly. Still, the dragon's offer was tempting. He glanced at Felix, who gave a hesitant nod. "What kind of item?" Leo asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Something symbolic of value," the dragon said. "A coin, perhaps. Dragons understand coins. They are small, shiny, and represent wealth. Forge me a coin that can recalibrate the market's perception of treasure." Leo sighed, running a hand through his hair. "A coin. Just a simple coin. No enchantments, no special properties. Just metal." "Exactly," the Dragon Emperor said, a hint of hope in his tone. Felix interjected, "Leo, remember the spoon. The nail. The tent. Your divine artisan's aura doesn't do simple." "I know," Leo muttered. "But what choice do I have? It's either this or get torn apart by mages or dragged back to the capital by guilds." He turned to the dragon. "I'll do it. But I need a forge. And materials." The Dragon Emperor waved a claw, and the tent's interior shifted. A section of the ground rose, forming a rough anvil and a small, magical furnace that glowed with dragonfire. A lump of copper sat nearby. "Use this. It is from my hoard, a piece of the old wealth. Perhaps it will help." Leo approached the makeshift forge, his hands trembling slightly. He could feel the divine artisan's aura humming beneath his skin, a constant, annoying buzz that promised catastrophe. He took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind. Just a coin. A round piece of metal. No fancy designs. No intentions beyond value. He heated the copper in the dragonfire, the flames licking at the metal until it glowed orange. Using a small hammer that had materialized beside the anvil, he began to shape it. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm was soothing, familiar. For a moment, he almost forgot the chaos he caused. This was what he wanted, to be a blacksmith, crafting simple things for simple needs. As he worked, he muttered to himself, just a coin. Just a coin. Don't be a world-tier artifact. Don't crash anything. Just be, a coin. Felix watched nervously, scribbling more notes. The psychological aspect is fascinating. Your intent seems to influence the outcome, but not in a controllable way. It's as if the system interprets your desires through a lens of absurdity. Not helping, Leo grunted, focusing on flattening the copper into a disc. He engraved a simple design, a dragon silhouette on one side, a mountain on the other. Nothing fancy. Just symbols of the Dragon Emperor and his home. Finally, he quenched it in a bucket of water that had appeared out of nowhere. Steam hissed, and the coin cooled, gleaming dully in the tent's eternal light. Leo held it up. It looked ordinary. A copper coin, slightly misshapen, with rough edges. He felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time, it worked. Maybe the aura had finally listened. Here, he said, handing it to the Dragon Emperor. A simple coin. Made from your hoard. It should represent value without breaking anything. The dragon took it delicately between two claws, his eyes narrowing as he examined it. Then, a glow began to emanate from the coin. Soft at first, then intensifying to a brilliant gold. Leo's heart sank. No, he whispered. Not again. The coin pulsed, and a system message flashed in the air, visible to all. Item forged, coin of hoard inflation. Grade, world tier artifact. Effect, any object deemed a hoard by draconic beings will experience exponential increase in perceived value, leading to hyperinflation in dragon-based economies. Warning, may cause confusion in treasure valuation. The Dragon Emperor stared at the coin, then at Leo. What have you done? I didn't mean to. Leo cried, backing away. I just made a coin. How was I supposed to know it would do that? Felix was already calculating, his face pale. Hyperinflation. If dragons start valuing everything excessively, their hoards will become meaningless again, but in the opposite direction. Instead of worthless, they'll think dirt is as valuable as diamonds. The economy will spiral. Outside the tent, a series of roars echoed through the mountains. The Dragon Emperor's eyes widened. My kin, they feel it. The coin's influence is spreading. He dropped the coin as if it were poison, and it clattered to the tent floor, still glowing. This is not what I asked for. I wanted restoration, not chaos. Leo's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry. I really am. I just want to retire. The dragon growled, smoke curling from his nostrils. Your retirement will have to wait. Come. We must see the damage. With a sweep of his wing, the Dragon Emperor transported them out of the tent. They reappeared on the mountainside, near the cabin. The dimensional mages were still frozen in time, mid-spellcasting. But in the distance, dragons were taking flight, dozens of them, from small wyverns to ancient WIRMS. And they were behaving strangely. One dragon landed near a pile of rocks and began lovingly nuzzling them, cooing as if they were precious gems. Another was gathering armfuls of dirt, stuffing them into a cave with glee. A third was trying to hoard a patch of moss, arguing with a squirrel over its value. The Dragon Emperor watched in horror. They think these things are treasure. The coin has warped their perception. My entire economy is based on shared value. If we cannot agree on what is valuable, our society will collapse. Leo felt a pang of guilt. Can't you just ignore the coin? It is a world-tier artifact, the dragon said bitterly. Its effects are systemic. It has already integrated into the draconic market. Look. He pointed to a nearby cave entrance, where a young dragon was trying to trade a shiny pebble for a sheep from a confused shepherd. The shepherd was nodding along, as if the pebble were solid gold. Felix muttered, the inflation is spreading to humans too. If dragons value dirt, soon humans will start pricing dirt like platinum. This could crash multiple markets. The Dragon Emperor turned to Leo, his eyes blazing. You must fix this. Now. How? Leo asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Every time I try to fix something, I make it worse. Then try something else. Undo the coin. Destroy it. Leo shook his head. I can't. Once an artifact is made, it's permanent. The system doesn't allow takebacks. The only way is to create something to counter it. Then do that, the dragon roared, causing the ground to tremble. Leo's mind raced. A counter to hyperinflation. Something that would stabilize value. But what? Another coin. That would just compound the problem. Maybe a scale, a balancing tool. But his aura would turn it into something absurd. He was trapped in a cycle of his own making. As he stood there, paralyzed by indecision, the cliffhanger unfolded. Across the realm, dragons were now hoarding not just dirt and rocks, but leaves, puddles of water, and even their own shed scales, all with the fervor of collectors discovering a new masterpiece. The Dragon Emperor's hoard, once filled with gold and jewels, was now being ignored in favor of a particularly shiny patch of lichen. Confusion reigned. Dragons bickered over the value of twigs, their ancient wisdom useless in the face of economic absurdity. And Leo realized, with a sinking heart, that his quest for retirement had just sparked a new kind of chaos, one where the very concept of treasure was being rewritten by a simple copper coin. The copper coin in Leo's hand still shimmered with the faint, treacherous glow of the coin of hoard inflation. Outside the tent of infinite space, which, despite its name, felt increasingly claustrophobic, the Dragon Emperor's roar had subsided into a low, rumbling growl of pure economic despair. Felix, the rogue economist who'd become Leo's unlikely companion, was pacing the tent's impossibly vast interior, muttering about supply shocks and liquidity traps. We need to think about this systemically, Felix said, pushing his spectacles up his nose. The dragon hoard devaluation from your dagger was a classic deflationary spiral, but this coin, this is hyperinflation on a mythological scale. Dragons are hoarding dirt, Leo. Dirt. The very concept of value is unraveling. Leo slumped onto a crate that had materialized from the tent's ever-shifting inventory. I just wanted to make a coin. One simple, honest coin to appease a giant lizard with a treasure complex. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the familiar, unwelcome tingle of his, divine artisan's aura, lurking beneath his skin. It was like having a sleeping god in his fingertips, one that woke up cranky and world-altering every time he touched a tool. Before Felix could launch into another lecture about monetary policy, the air outside the tent rippled. Not with magic, but with something more mundane and terrifying, the sound of marching feet, clanking armor, and raised voices. Lots of them. We have incoming, Felix whispered, peering through a tent flap that offered a view of the mountain clearing where they'd camped. And not just dragons. Leo joined him. The scene outside was a study in escalating absurdity. To the left, the Dragon Emperor loomed, his scales dulled by grief, surrounded by a cadre of smaller dragons who were experimentally piling up rocks and twigs, their expressions confused. To the right, a contingent of the Merchants' Guild had arrived, their leader, a sharp-faced woman named Guildmaster Celine whom Leo had last seen watching platinum markets crash, barking orders. Behind them, a group of robed figures from the Alchemist Guild stood with glowing vials, still bitter about the cauldron of infinite sustenance. And from the trees emerged a new faction, warriors in gleaming armor bearing the insignia of the Knightly Order of the Sacred Anvil, who apparently saw Leo as some sort of blacksmith messiah. This is a guild war in the making, Felix said, his voice tight. They're not here to talk. They're here to claim you. As if on cue, the shouting began. The blacksmith belongs to the Merchants' Guild. Celine declared, her voice cutting through the din, his power must be harnessed for economic stability. We'll put him in a controlled crafting chamber, monitored, of course, to produce regulated artifacts. Harnessed? He's a calamity, roared the Alchemist Guild leader, a man with a beard stained by potion fumes. He must be eliminated before he destroys another industry. Our food potion market is in ruins. Blasphemy, bellowed the head knight, a massive man with an anvil-shaped pauldron. The divine artisan is a gift. We must worship him, build a temple, offer our finest metals for his blessed crafts. And over it all, the Dragon Emperor's voice thundered. He is mine. He broke my hoard, he will fix it. Or I will incinerate all of you and take him to my volcanic vault. Leo felt a headache brewing behind his eyes. This was exactly what he'd feared since that first nail, the moment when his desire for a quiet retirement would be swallowed by the world's competing madnesses. He could see the factions edging closer, weapons and wands and claws glinting in the mountain sun. The air crackled with tension, a palpable force that made the hairs on his arms stand up. Think, Leo, think, Felix urged, pulling him back into the tent. We need a solution that doesn't involve you becoming a prisoner, a martyr, or a dragon's pet economist. A solution? Leo laughed, a hollow sound. Every time I try to make something simple, it turns into a world-tier disaster. A nail crashes construction. A spoon summons demons. A coin makes dragons value gravel. What am I supposed to craft? A white flag? That'd probably become the flag of eternal surrender, and disband all armies permanently. But as he said it, an idea flickered, dangerous, desperate, and born of sheer exhaustion. They wanted peace. A treaty? Fine. He'd give them a treaty. Maybe, just maybe, if he focused all his intent on creating something to end conflict, his cursed aura would interpret it literally enough to actually work. Or it would turn into a doomsday device. At this point, Leo was willing to roll the dice. I'm going to forge a peace treaty, he said, the words tasting like ash. Felix stared at him. You mean write one? On paper? No. Forge it. In metal. It's the only language my skill understands. Leo moved to the corner of the tent where his portable anvil and hammer lay, basic tools he'd brought, which had so far miraculously not transformed into anything apocalyptic. He rummaged through a sack of supplies, pulling out a thin sheet of bronze he'd picked up in the capital. It was meant for repairs, but it would have to do. Outside, the shouting intensified. A flash of magic lit up the tense fabric as the alchemists and knights began skirmishing. The Dragon Emperor roared, and the ground shook. Time was running out. Leo placed the bronze sheet on the anvil. He took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind of everything but one thought, peace. An end to fighting. A stalemate, if necessary, just stop the violence. He didn't want anyone killed, worshipped, or imprisoned. He just wanted them to freeze, to pause, to give him a damn moment to breathe. His hammer rose and fell. Clang. The sound echoed in the tent, and immediately, he felt the aura awaken, a warm, golden pulse that traveled from his heart down his arm and into the metal. The bronze shimmered, its surface rippling like water. Words began to etch themselves into it, not in any language Leo knew, but in glowing, intricate runes that seemed to whisper of ancient laws and absolute decrees. Clang. With each strike, the glow intensified. Leo's focus narrowed to the metal, to the idea of cessation. No more guild wars. No more demands. Just, stop. He imagined the factions frozen in place, their arguments hanging in the air, their weapons stilled. He poured all his frustration, his longing for quiet, his sheer annoyance at the world's inability to leave him alone, into the hammer blows. Asterisk clang. Clang. Clang, asterisk. The bronze sheet was no longer just metal. It was humming with power, vibrating on the anvil. The runes blazed so brightly that Felix had to shield his eyes. Leo, whatever you're doing, it's working, or something, he yelled over the growing hum. Outside, the sounds of conflict began to change. The shouts turned into confused murmurs, then into silence. The magical flashes ceased. Even the Dragon Emperor's growls cut off abruptly. Leo delivered one final hammer strike, pouring every ounce of his will into it. Just, stop, he whispered. The bronze sheet erupted in a burst of light. When it faded, lying on the anvil was no longer a simple sheet, but a polished, rectangular plaque, about the size of a large book. The runes covered its surface in a perfect, unbroken pattern, and at its center was a symbol, two crossed hammers over a stilled pendulum. A system notification appeared in Leo's vision, glowing with ominous finality. World-tier artifact created, Treaty of Absolute Stalemate. Effect, all active conflicts within a global radius are frozen in place. No violence, aggression, or hostile action can be initiated or continued. Trade, commerce, and economic transactions are similarly halted. The world enters a state of enforced standstill until the treaty is broken or dissolved, asterisk asterisk. Warning, this artifact operates on divine arbitration principles. Do not attempt to craft countermeasures, asterisk asterisk. Leo stared at it, a cold dread seeping into his bones. He'd wanted peace, but this was paralysis. What did you do? Felix asked, his voice hushed. Before Leo could answer, they stepped out of the tent. The scene that greeted them was surreal, silent, and utterly still. The mountain clearing was frozen in a tableau of arrested motion. Guildmaster Celine was mid-shout, her mouth open, a finger pointed accusingly at the alchemists. The alchemist leader had a vial raised, its contents glowing but motionless. The head knight was in the act of drawing his sword, the blade half out of its scabbard. And the dragon emperor was poised to take flight, one massive wing extended, his eyes wide with what looked like sudden realization. Around them, the smaller dragons were frozen too, some holding rocks mid-horde. Birds hung in the air, unmoving. Clouds in the sky seemed to have stopped drifting. The very wind had died. It's not just them, Felix said, his economist's mind racing. Look. He pointed down the mountain slope, toward a distant trade road. A merchant caravan was visible, the wagons stopped dead. Merchants were frozen in the act of bargaining, coins suspended between hands. Further afield, in the direction of the capital, Leo could just make out the glint of city walls, and no movement whatsoever. The trade halt, Felix whispered. You've stopped everything. Not just fighting. All of it. The global economy, it's paused. Leo walked forward, the treaty of absolute stalemate, feeling heavy in his hands. He approached Guildmaster Celine, her face locked in a snarl. He waved a hand in front of her eyes. Nothing. She was like a statue, breathing so shallowly it was almost imperceptible. Alive, but utterly inert. I didn't mean this, Leo said, his voice echoing in the unnatural quiet. I just wanted them to stop trying to grab me. You got your wish, Felix said, joining him. But at what cost? No trade means no food shipments, no resource exchanges, no markets. This isn't peace, Leo. It's stasis. The world's grinding to a halt. As if to emphasize the point, a system message flickered at the edge of Leo's vision, not just for him, but seemingly broadcast to everyone, frozen or not. Global alert, treaty of absolute stalemate in effect. All conflict and trade suspended. Stand by for, ****. The message glitched, the words fragmenting into nonsense symbols before vanishing. Even the system, it seemed, was struggling with this new reality. Leo looked at the factions around him, their ambitions and fears captured in metal and magic. The Merchants Guild, wanting to control him for profit. The Alchemist Guild, wanting him dead for ruin. The Knightly Order, wanting to worship him for power. The Dragon Emperor, wanting to use him for restoration. All of them, now stuck, their desires unmet, their plans unfulfilled. And in the silence, Leo felt a terrible loneliness. He'd stopped the noise, but he hadn't found quiet. He'd created a world where nothing moved, nothing changed, nothing lived. It was retirement in the worst possible way, a retirement for everyone, imposed by a bronze plaque and his own desperate crafting. Felix placed a hand on his shoulder. We need to fix this. But how do you fix something that stops all fixing? Leo didn't have an answer. He stared at the treaty, the runes glowing softly, a permanent reminder of his inability to do anything without catastrophic consequence. The cliffhanger hung in the frozen air, unspoken but felt by every motionless soul. The world was at a standstill, and the only man who could move was the one who had caused it, trapped in the knowledge that his next move might break reality entirely. The world had become a frozen diorama. Leo stood in what had been the bustling central square of the capital city, now transformed into a tableau of suspended animation. A merchant was frozen mid-shout, his mouth open in what would have been a cry about prices, one hand clutching a ledger that showed numbers Leo couldn't read but knew were probably nonsensical. A guild enforcer was caught in the act of drawing a sword, the blade half out of its scabbard, his face twisted in aggression that would never complete its expression. Even the pigeons in the sky were motionless, suspended in mid-flap against a sky that seemed to have stopped its gradual darkening at twilight. Only two figures moved in the stillness. This is excessive, Felix said, his voice unnaturally loud in the absolute silence. The rogue economist was examining a frozen merchant's stall, trying to touch a bolt of fabric that refused to yield to his fingers. It was as if the entire world had been dipped in invisible amber. The treaty of absolute stalemate. You weren't kidding about the absolute part. Leo rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. I just wanted them to stop fighting. I thought a peace treaty would, make peace. You made stasis, Felix corrected, turning to face him. His usual sardonic expression was gone, replaced by genuine concern. Universal economic and conflict stasis. No trade, no violence, no movement. The entire global economy is frozen at this exact moment. Do you have any idea what that means? That I've finally achieved my retirement goal? Leo offered weakly. No one can bother me if they're all frozen. Felix didn't smile. They're not just frozen, Leo. They're suspended. Biological processes, magical flows, economic transactions, all halted. This isn't peace. This is a pause button pressed on reality itself. And if we don't find a way to unpause it? He trailed off, gesturing at the frozen world around them. Leo looked at his hands. They were ordinary blacksmith's hands, calloused, scarred from years at the forge, stained with soot that never quite washed out. But now they seemed alien to him. These were the hands that had crafted the nail that crashed construction markets. The spoon that attracted demon armies. The treaty that froze the world. Why does this keep happening? He whispered, more to himself than to Felix. I'm just making ordinary things. A nail. A spoon. A treaty. They shouldn't do this. Felix approached him, his footsteps echoing in the silent square. I've been studying your creations since we met. The economic patterns, the system alerts, the way reality itself seems to warp around your crafts. There's a consistency to the chaos. What kind of consistency? Every item you create becomes a world-tier artifact, Felix said, pulling a small notebook from his coat. Leo hadn't noticed him taking notes, but then again, Felix was always observing. But they're not just powerful items. They're corrections. Or overcorrections. The nail of unbreakable binding didn't just make a strong nail, it made the concept of binding absolute, which crashed the entire enchanted construction industry because why pay for complex binding spells when a simple nail does it perfectly? Leo remembered the first time he'd seen the system notification about his nail. The way the words had glowed in his vision, item transcended, nail of unbreakable binding. World tier artifact created. Market impact, enchanted construction minus 98.7%. And the spoon, Felix continued, flipping a page. The spoon of Demon King's essence. You used leftover demon core fragments, yes. I was cleaning my forge, Leo said defensively. They were in the scrap pile. I didn't think. You never think, Felix said, but there was no malice in it. That's the point. You don't intend these outcomes. Your skill, divine artisan's aura, it's taking your basic intent and amplifying it. Warping it. But according to every system record I could access before everything froze, there's no skill like yours in the entire integrated database. Leo felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying your skill might not be a skill at all, Felix said, closing his notebook. It might be a bug. The word hung in the air between them. Bug. Glitch. Error. All around them, the frozen world seemed to press in, a silent accusation. That's impossible, Leo said, but even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't. He remembered the system apocalypse, the day reality had shattered and reformed, merging Earth with this fantasy realm. He'd been working in his garage workshop, repairing a bicycle chain, when the sky had torn open. When he'd awakened in this new world, the skill was just there. As if it had always been part of him. Think about it, Felix pressed. The system that governs our world now, it's a patchwork. A forced integration of two realities that were never meant to merge. There had to be errors. Glitches. Your skill creates items that warp economic balances on a global scale. That's not a feature, Leo. That's a catastrophic failure. A memory surfaced, something Leo had pushed aside in his desire for simple retirement. In the first days after the apocalypse, before he tried blacksmithing, there had been whispers. System messages that flickered at the edge of his vision. Warnings about unstable integrations and reality anchors. He'd ignored them, focused on surviving. If it's a bug, Leo said slowly, how do we fix it? Felix smiled, but it was a grim expression. We find the source code. Source code. The underlying programming of the system, Felix explained. Every integrated system has source code, the fundamental instructions that make it work. If your skill is a bug, then somewhere in that code is the error. Fix the error, fix your skill. And where do we find this source code? Leo asked, though he already suspected the answer wouldn't be simple. Felix reached into his coat again and produced a small, crystalline object. It glowed with a soft blue light, and as Leo looked at it, he felt a strange resonance, a humming in his bones that matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. What is that? A clue, Felix said. I've been collecting system fragments since the apocalypse. Most people ignore them, they're just background noise. But economists, we notice patterns. This one started glowing when you forged the treaty. He handed the crystal to Leo. As Leo's fingers closed around it, the world shifted. Not literally, the frozen tableau remained. But in his mind's eye, he saw code. Streaming lines of light and symbols, most of it incomprehensible, but here and there he recognized patterns. Economic formulas. Market principles. Supply and demand curves rendered in glowing script. And in the center of it all, a flaw. A single line of code that was different from the rest. It pulsed with a familiar energy, the same energy he felt when he forged. When his divine artisan's aura activated. Skill, divine_artisan_aura. Status, active. Integration, incomplete. Reality_anchor, unstable. Effect, item_transcendence. Constraint, none. No constraints, Leo whispered, understanding dawning. Every other skill has constraints. Mana costs. Cooldowns. Material requirements. Mine has none. Exactly, Felix said, watching him closely. Your skill bypasses every balancing mechanism in the system. It's not supposed to do that. It's like a door that was left unlocked during the integration, and you walked through it. The crystal pulsed again, and the vision shifted. Now Leo saw a map, not a geographical map, but a schematic of the system itself. Layers upon layers of interconnected code, and at the very foundation, a single point of access. An ancient dungeon. The image showed a structure buried deep beneath the mountains at the edge of the continent. In the old world, it might have been a data center or server farm. In this integrated reality, it had become something else, a physical manifestation of the system's core. The source code is there, Felix said, seeing the same vision reflected in Leo's eyes. The dungeon wasn't built, it formed. When the realities merged, the system needed an anchor point. That dungeon is where the integration happened. Where the source code resides. Leo handed the crystal back, his mind racing. If we go there, if we fix this bug. Your skill might stop warping everything you touch, Felix finished. Or it might disappear entirely. Or it might do something worse. We're dealing with fundamental reality here, Leo. This isn't like fixing a broken plow. For a long moment, Leo looked at the frozen world around them. The merchant who would never complete his sale. The enforcer who would never draw his sword. The dragon emperor, somewhere out there, frozen in mid-roar over his devalued horde. All because of him. Because he'd wanted a quiet retirement. I have to try, Leo said, his voice firm for the first time in weeks. I can't leave them like this. Felix nodded. I thought you'd say that. The dungeon is 3 days' journey to the north. Through frozen mountains and deadlands. And we'll be traveling through a world that's completely still. Will that make it easier or harder? Both, Felix said. Easier because nothing will attack us. Harder because nothing works. No inns. No markets. No transportation except our own feet. And if the stasis affects the environment too. He didn't need to finish. Leo understood. They might be walking into a world where even the wind didn't blow. They prepared in silence. Leo gathered what tools he could from his frozen forge, a simple hammer, some basic ingots, a water skin that was thankfully still liquid inside. Felix collected his notes and a few other crystalline fragments that glowed with system energy. As they left the capital, the full scope of the stasis became apparent. A river was frozen mid-flow, water suspended in crystalline arcs. Clouds hung motionless in the sky. Trees stood with their leaves unmoving, not even rustling in a breeze that didn't exist. The only sound was their footsteps and breathing. For the first day, they walked in near silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Leo kept seeing the code in his mind, that single flawed line that represented his skill. Constraint, none. What had the system administrators been thinking when they integrated the worlds? Had they even known about this bug? On the second day, they reached the foothills of the northern mountains. Here, the stasis had created bizarre landscapes. A waterfall hung like a glass sculpture, droplets caught in mid-fall. A herd of deer were frozen mid-leap, their muscles taut with motion that would never complete. "It's beautiful," Felix said quietly, looking at the frozen waterfall. "In a terrible way." "It's my fault," Leo said. The words had been building in him since they left the capital. "Yes," Felix agreed, not unkindly. "But fault implies intent. You didn't mean to do this. That's what makes you different from the guilds and nobles who want to exploit you. They see power. You see, craft." "I see a mess," Leo said, kicking a frozen pebble. It didn't move, it was part of the stasis field. "A big, world-sized mess that I made. And you're trying to clean it up," Felix pointed out. "That counts for something." On the third day, they reached the mountains proper. The air grew colder, though without wind, the cold was a static, penetrating thing that settled in their bones. The path grew steep, winding up through passes that showed signs of ancient construction, carved steps, archways that might once have been gates, all now just part of the frozen landscape. And then, as the sun hung motionless in the late afternoon sky, they saw it. The dungeon entrance was unlike anything Leo had ever seen. It wasn't a cave or a ruined temple. It was geometric. A perfect arch of smooth, featureless stone that gleamed with a faint inner light. The ground around it was bare of snow or vegetation, as if the stasis didn't extend here. As they approached, system messages began to flicker at the edge of Leo's vision. Approaching system anchor point. Warning, unstable reality detected. Accessing historical records. Felix saw them too, his eyes widening. "It's reacting to you." They stopped before the arch. Through it, Leo could see darkness, not the darkness of a cave, but a deeper, more absolute darkness that seemed to swallow light. "This is it," Felix said. "The source." Leo took a deep breath, steeling himself. He'd faced angry guilds, demon generals, weeping dragon emperors. But this was different. This wasn't about fixing a market or appeasing a faction. This was about fixing reality itself. He stepped forward. And as his foot crossed the threshold of the arch, a system message blazed across his vision, bright and urgent. "Warning, entering may trigger total economic collapse." The words hung there, pulsing with crimson light. Total economic collapse. Not just a market crash or an industry bankruptcy. The complete unraveling of every economic system in the integrated world. Behind him, Felix had gone pale. "Leo. I have to," Leo said, not turning around. "If I don't fix this, the world stays frozen forever. If I do, maybe it collapses. But at least it's a choice." He thought of his village. Of the simple forge he'd wanted to retire to. Of the quiet life that had been stolen from him by a skill he never asked for. "Wait," Felix said, moving to stand beside him. "You're not doing this alone. I got you into this mess with my theories. I'm seeing it through." Leo looked at him, the rogue economist who had seen him not as a calamity or a savior, but as a puzzle to be solved. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Felix said, and for once, there was no sarcasm in his voice. "Someone needs to take notes." Together, they stepped through the arch. The darkness swallowed them whole. For a moment, there was nothing, no light, no sound, no sensation of movement. Then the world resolved around them, and Leo found himself standing in a chamber that defied understanding. It was vast, stretching away into infinity in every direction. The floor, walls, and ceiling were all made of the same featureless, glowing material. And everywhere, floating in the air, etched into surfaces, streaming in rivers of light, was code. System code. Reality_integration, 87.4% complete. Anomalies detected, 12,847. Critical error, skill_divine_artisan_aura. The last line pulsed with the same energy Leo felt in his own hands. He reached out, and as his fingers neared the floating text, it reacted, shifting, rearranging, showing him more. Error location, reality_anchor_protocol. Cause, incomplete merge of divine crafting framework. Effect, unconstrained item transcendence. Solution. The solution line was blank. Incomplete. "It doesn't know how to fix itself," Felix whispered, awe in his voice. He was looking at the streams of code with the hunger of a scholar presented with the ultimate text. The system knows there's an error, but it doesn't have the protocol to correct it. So what do we do? Leo asked, his voice echoing strangely in the vast space. We give it a solution, Felix said, turning to him. You're the blacksmith, Leo. You don't just fix things, you make new things. The system needs a patch. A fix. Something to constrain your skill without breaking it entirely. Leo looked at his hands again. At the calluses and scars. At the ordinary, human hands that had caused so much extraordinary chaos. What if I make it worse, he asked, the fear finally vocalized. What if you don't try? Felix countered. All around them, the code continued to stream, the living, breathing heart of the integrated world. And at its center, the flaw that was Leo's skill. He took a deep breath, feeling the familiar hum of divine Artisan's aura, awakening in response to the system energy around them. Okay, he said. Let's fix this. And somewhere in the darkness of the dungeon, something stirred. The chamber pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic light. Streams of glowing blue code flowed across the walls like liquid electricity, forming intricate patterns that shifted and reformed with mathematical precision. Leo stood frozen for a moment, his breath catching in his throat. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something ancient and mechanical, like the inside of a colossal clock that had been ticking since the dawn of creation. Felix, the rogue economist who had become Leo's unlikely companion, stepped forward, his boots making no sound on the polished obsidian floor. Look at this, he whispered, pointing to a section of the wall where the code coalesced into familiar shapes. Supply curves, demand graphs, market equilibrium models, it's like walking through a living economics textbook. Leo tore his eyes from the mesmerizing display. You said this was the system's physical anchor point. Why does it look like a stock exchange threw up in here? Because the system that merged our worlds runs on economic principles, Felix explained, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. When the apocalypse happened, it didn't just combine magic and technology, it built reality itself on market mechanics. Your skill, divine Artisan's aura, isn't just creating powerful items. It's introducing variables the system can't price properly. You're writing checks the universe can't cash. Ahead of them, the chamber narrowed into a corridor. As they approached, glowing barriers materialized across the passage, 3 shimmering walls of light, each displaying a different economic puzzle. The first showed a simple supply and demand graph with wildly fluctuating lines. The second depicted a complex auction with phantom bidders. The third presented a currency exchange rate that kept resetting to zero. Puzzles based on market principles, Leo muttered, recalling Felix's earlier warning. Of course. Because why would a dungeon that could trigger total economic collapse be straightforward? Felix studied the barriers, his economist's mind already working. These aren't just obstacles. They're teaching tools. The system wants us to understand what we're messing with before we reach the core. I don't want to understand it, Leo grumbled. I just want to fix it so I can go back to my village and take a nap without accidentally creating a legendary artifact that makes pillows obsolete. He approached the first barrier. The graph showed the price of enchanted lumber over time, a commodity he'd inadvertently crashed with his nail of unbreakable binding. The lines jerked erratically, spiking to impossible heights before plummeting to negative values. A system prompt appeared in the air before him. Solve for equilibrium, input correct market clearing price. Leo stared at the graph. I'm a blacksmith, not an economist. How am I supposed to? Wait, Felix interrupted, his eyes narrowing. Look at the data points. They're not random. They're following the pattern of every market you've disrupted. The spike here corresponds to when you created the cauldron of infinite sustenance. The crash here matches the dragon horde devaluation. A cold realization settled in Leo's stomach. It's tracking my mistakes. More than that, Felix said, tapping the air where the graph hovered. It's showing you the solution. The equilibrium price isn't a number, it's a concept. The system wants you to understand that true balance comes from accepting fluctuation, not forcing stability. Leo frowned. That's surprisingly philosophical for a bunch of glowing code. Try thinking like a craftsman, Felix suggested. When you temper steel, you don't force it to be perfectly rigid. You allow for flexibility, for the natural properties of the material. Markets are the same. Closing his eyes, Leo reached for the understanding that usually came to him when he worked metal. The feel of the hammer in his hand, the heat of the forge, the moment when raw material transformed into something greater. When he opened his eyes again, he didn't see numbers. He saw patterns. His hand moved almost without conscious thought, tracing a gentle curve through the air. The graph responded, the wild fluctuations smoothing into a gentle wave, not perfectly flat, but naturally balanced. The first barrier dissolved with a soft chime. "You did it!" Felix exclaimed. "I didn't do anything," Leo said, staring at his hands. "I just remembered what it feels like to make something without trying to control every aspect of it." The second barrier proved more challenging. The auction displayed phantom bidders competing for a single, glowing orb that pulsed with system energy. The prompt read: "Determine fair value, bid must reflect true worth, not perceived scarcity." "This one's about the sort of economic equilibrium," Felix observed. "When you created it to stabilize the platinum exchange rate, you introduced an artificial value that distorted natural pricing." Leo watched the phantom bidders drive the price higher and higher. One bidder offered a kingdom. Another offered a century of service. A third offered their very soul. The orb's glow intensified with each bid, as if feeding on the desperation. "They're bidding based on what they think it's worth, not what it actually is," Leo realized. "Just like the Merchants Guild thought they could use me to control markets." He stepped forward, ignoring the bidding entirely. Instead, he focused on the orb itself. What was its true worth? Not as a tool for manipulation, but as, what? An object. A thing. Like every item he'd ever created, it had value beyond its function. "It's worth exactly what someone will pay for it," Felix said quietly, "but only if that payment comes from genuine need, not greed." Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out the only thing of value he carried, a simple iron ingot, unworked and plain. He'd brought it from his forge as a reminder of what he'd lost, the simple joy of crafting ordinary things. He placed the ingot before the orb. "This is what it's worth to me. The chance to make things that don't break the world." The bidding stopped. The phantom bidders faded. The orb floated down and touched the iron ingot, which glowed briefly before returning to normal. The second barrier vanished. 2 down, 1 to go. The third barrier showed the currency exchange rate resetting to 0 over and over, a perfect representation of the economic stasis caused by Leo's Treaty of Absolute Stalemate. The prompt appeared. "Restart the flow, input catalyst for renewed exchange." "This is the one that froze the world," Leo said, a pang of guilt twisting in his chest. "How do I restart something without causing another crash?" Felix studied the resetting numbers. The treaty halted all conflict and trade because it enforced perfect equilibrium. But economies need friction to function. They need disagreement, negotiation, the back and forth of value assessment. "So I need to introduce imperfection." "Controlled imperfection," Felix corrected. "Like the slight impurities that give steel its character." Leo thought about all the items he'd created. The nail that bound too well. The pot that sustained too completely. The sword that balanced too perfectly. Each had been flawless in its function, and each had broken something because of it. He needed to make something that wasn't perfect. Something with a deliberate flaw. Reaching into his crafting pouch, Leo pulled out his tools, a small hammer, a pair of tongs, and a chunk of copper he'd picked up during their journey. He didn't have a forge, but in this chamber of flowing system code, he didn't need one. The very air hummed with creative potential. "What are you doing?" Felix asked, watching as Leo began to shape the copper. "Making a key," Leo said, his focus entirely on the metal. "The outline said I'd forge a key to bypass the traps. But I'm not going to make it perfect. I'm going to make it, almost right." He worked with careful deliberation, introducing small imperfections as he went. A slight asymmetry in the teeth. A tiny crack in the bow. A minuscule variation in the thickness. When he was done, he held up a copper key that looked functional but subtly wrong in a dozen small ways. As he finished the final stroke of his hammer, the key glowed with sudden intensity. System text materialized around it. Key of market manipulation created. Grade, World Tier Artifact. Effect, allows temporary bypass of economic barriers by introducing controlled market inefficiencies. Warning, use may attract system oversight. Of course it's world tier, Leo sighed. Even my flawed creations can't be ordinary. He inserted the key into the third barrier. Instead of dissolving like the others, the barrier rippled, forming a doorway. Through it, they could see a larger chamber beyond, filled with even more intense flows of system code. As they stepped through, alarms blared through the chamber. Red warning lights flashed, and the flowing code on the walls turned angry crimson. A voice boomed from everywhere and nowhere at once. Unauthorized crafting detected. From the center of the chamber, a figure coalesced from light and numbers. It stood 10 feet tall, its body composed of shifting economic charts, glowing spreadsheets, and floating mathematical equations. Where a face should have been, a stock market ticker scrolled too fast to read. In one hand, it held a massive ledger that glowed with punitive energy. System Guardian engaged, the voice announced, now coming from the creature itself. Entity Leo has violated protocol by creating artifact without economic justification. Prepare for audit. Felix backed away, his face pale. I don't think audit means what it usually does here. The Guardian raised its ledger. Columns of numbers shot out like projectiles, slamming into the ground around them and forming cage-like barriers of pure data. Leo gripped the key of market manipulation, feeling its imperfect weight in his hand. You said my crafting was unauthorized, he called out to the Guardian. According to whose authority? The Guardian's ticker face paused, displaying a single phrase, System Protocol 7.3.1. And who wrote that protocol? Leo pressed, stepping forward despite Felix's warning gesture. If my skill is a bug in the system, then the rules themselves are flawed. You're enforcing broken laws. Laws are absolute, scrolled across the Guardian's face. Markets aren't. Felix shouted, finding his courage. That's the whole point. Leo's creations keep breaking your system because your system tries to force absolute rules on something that needs flexibility. The Guardian hesitated. The numbers comprising its body stuttered, recalculating. In that moment of uncertainty, Leo saw his opening. He raised the key. You want economic justification? How's this for justification? Sometimes you need to break a few rules to fix what's truly broken. He thrust the key toward the Guardian. Instead of attacking, it emitted a pulse of energy that wasn't destructive but corrective. The Guardian's form wavered, the absolute numbers in its ledger shifting to show ranges, probabilities, variables. Recalculating, scrolled across its face. Protocol 7.3.1 may contain exceptions. That's it. Felix exclaimed. You're introducing the concept of exceptions. Of context-dependent rules. The Guardian lowered its ledger. The data cages around them dissolved. Entity Leo's crafting reclassified, not unauthorized, but unprecedented. Proceed to core. Warning, further crafting may trigger cascading system failure. It gestured toward the far end of the chamber, where a massive door stood sealed with layers of economic safeguards. The key of market manipulation glowed in Leo's hand, responding to the proximity of whatever lay beyond. As they approached the door, Leo felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. This was it, the heart of the system, where he might finally fix the bug that had turned his simple desire for retirement into a world-spanning calamity. But as he inserted the key into the lock, he couldn't shake the feeling that some doors, once opened, could never be fully closed again. The key turned with a sound like shattering glass and ringing coins. The door began to open. And from within, a light so pure it hurt to look at began to spill forth. The light from beyond the door wasn't just bright, it was intelligent. It pulsed with a rhythm that felt like breathing, and as Leo stepped through with Felix close behind, he realized they weren't in a chamber at all. They were standing inside a thought. What in the seven hells? Felix whispered, his economist's mind struggling to process what his eyes reported. The space around them was neither stone nor code, but something between concept and reality. Walls shimmered with shifting equations, supply curves that bent into demand spirals, inflation rates that bloomed like flowers before wilting into deflationary thorns. The air hummed with the sound of markets opening and closing, a distant chorus of clinking coins and rustling parchment. At the center of it all floated what could only be described as a heart, a crystalline orb the size of a carriage wheel, pulsing with soft golden light. Within it, Leo could see reflections of his own creations, the nail of unbreakable binding, the cauldron of infinite sustenance, the spoon of Demon King's essence, all orbiting like wayward moons. This is the dungeon core? Leo asked, his voice echoing strangely in the conceptual space. It looks more like a memory. It's the system's economic memory, came a voice that wasn't a voice at all. It resonated directly in their minds, calm and ancient. And you, Leo of the village, are both its greatest anomaly and its most necessary correction. The light from the core intensified, coalescing into a humanoid form, neither male nor female, but something elemental. It wore robes woven from supply chains and had eyes that flickered with stock tickers. Leo recognized the presence from earlier encounters. This was the system's consciousness, or at least the part of it that governed markets. Felix took an involuntary step back. You're the administrator. The one who's been sending guardians. I am the market oversight protocol, the being said, its form shifting to show brief glimpses of crashing markets and soaring commodities. And I have been watching you since your first nail-warped reality. Tell me, Blacksmith, did you ever wonder why your skill exists? Leo rubbed his temples, the familiar headache of economic responsibility beginning to throb. I assumed it was a bug. A glitch from when the worlds merged. A common misconception, the protocol said, floating closer. Its robe brushed against a floating equation, causing it to recalculate instantly. When the system apocalypse occurred, reality itself gained rules, levels, skills, monsters. But what most fail to understand is that economies are living systems too. They breathe, grow, and can collapse. The system needed a failsafe. A failsafe? Leo echoed, his mind racing. You mean? Your divine artisan's aura was never a cheat skill, the protocol continued, its tone carrying something like regret. It was an emergency valve. When markets become too rigid, when monopolies choke innovation, when wealth concentrates to the point of societal fracture, the system requires disruption. Your creations, as chaotic as they are, introduce necessary chaos. They break paradigms. Felix's eyes widened with sudden understanding. That's why the nail crashed enchanted construction. The guilds had locked down innovation for centuries, charging exorbitant prices for basic binding magic. Exactly, the protocol said. And the cauldron? Alchemists had turned sustenance into a luxury good. Your spoon with demon essence. The demon economy was stagnating under the king's absolute control. Each of your accidents corrected a systemic flaw. Leo stared at his hands, the calluses from years of honest work suddenly feeling alien. So I'm not a calamity. I'm a tool. You are the failsafe, the protocol corrected gently. But the valve has been opened too wide. Your recent creations, the treaty of absolute stalemate, the key of market manipulation, they're not just correcting flaws. They're threatening to collapse the entire economic framework. The system cannot handle this much disruption at once. A projection appeared between them, showing the world outside the dungeon. Merchants frozen mid-transaction by the treaty's effects. Dragons hoarding worthless rocks. Dimensional mages weeping over devalued storage artifacts. The image zoomed out to show reality itself beginning to fray at the edges, spacetime shimmering with unstable energy. You see the problem, the protocol said. The system is overloading. If this continues, reality will unravel. Not just markets, everything. Felix grabbed Leo's arm, his fingers trembling. We have to do something. There is a solution, the protocol said, its form shifting to show a simple blacksmith's anvil floating in the light. One final craft. Not to destroy, but to reset. To give the economy a fresh start while preserving the lessons learned. Leo's throat felt dry. What do I need to make? The choice is yours, the protocol replied. But it must be something fundamental. Something that represents both creation and foundation. The system suggests an anvil, the very symbol of your craft. For a long moment, Leo stood silent. He thought about his village, about the simple life he'd wanted. He thought about the Dragon Emperor's tears, the alchemist's rage, the guild leader's greed. He thought about the weight of every accidental creation, and the realization that maybe, just maybe, they hadn't been accidents at all. All right, he said finally, his voice steady. An anvil it is. The protocol gestured, and materials appeared around them, not just metal, but concepts made solid. A bar of iron that shone with the light of fair trade. A chunk of coal that burned with competitive spirit. A handful of sand that glittered with innovation. Even the air itself seemed to thicken with economic principles waiting to be forged. Leo approached the floating materials, his hands already moving with the muscle memory of 10,000 crafts. He didn't need a forge here, the very space responded to his will. As he reached for the iron, the divine artisan's aura activated not as a wild surge, but as a focused beam of golden light. Remember, the protocol whispered in his mind. This must balance everything. Too much reset, and you erase progress. Too little, and the collapse continues. Felix watched, his economist's mind trying to catalog the process. The marginal utility of each strike, the opportunity cost of every shaping. Leo, you're not just forging metal. You're forging economic theory itself. Leo didn't answer. He was in the zone, that perfect state where craftsman and craft become one. He hammered the iron not with physical blows, but with intention. Each strike sang with the sound of markets correcting. Each shaping whispered of supply finding demand. Slowly, the anvil took form. It was simpler than he'd expected, no ornate designs, no glowing runes. Just a solid, honest anvil of dark iron. But as he worked, something strange happened. The materials began reacting unpredictably. The fair trade iron developed a hairline fracture that wept liquid gold. The competitive coal ignited with flames that burned in reverse. The innovative sand swirled into patterns that defied geometry. Leo's hands moved faster, trying to control the chaos, but the more he worked, the more unstable it became. It's rejecting the balance. Felix cried, pointing as equations on the walls began to unravel. The protocol's form flickered. The system is conflicted. Part of it wants the reset, but another part fears losing the diversity your disruptions created. Leo gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead despite the lack of heat. I just want to make something that lets people live. He brought his will down in one final, decisive shaping, not with the perfection he'd used for every other world-tier artifact, but with deliberate imperfection. He left a small flaw near the base. A tiny, almost invisible asymmetry. And the anvil stabilized. It settled onto the conceptual floor with a thud that echoed through reality. For a moment it was just an anvil, solid, heavy, ordinary. Then it began to glow. Not with the golden light of Leo's aura, but with something else. A chaotic rainbow of energy that pulsed in time with the unraveling spacetime outside. Cracks appeared in the air around them, showing glimpses of other places, a village where time flowed backward, a capital city where gravity had become a commodity, a dragon's lair where treasure had turned to light. What's happening? Felix yelled over the rising hum. The protocol's form was dissolving into numbers. The anvil is, both reset and continuation. It contains all possibilities. Leo, what did you do? Leo stared at his creation, understanding dawning. I didn't make it perfect. I made it, human. The anvil's glow intensified, becoming so bright it hurt to look at. The chaotic energy swirled into a vortex above it, pulling at the very fabric of the chamber. Equations tore from the walls and were consumed. The memory images of Leo's previous creations shattered like glass. It's choosing, the protocol cried, its voice fading. The reset is beginning, but the method is unpredictable. Felix grabbed Leo's shoulder. We need to get out of here. But Leo couldn't move. He was transfixed by the anvil, by the realization of what he'd truly forged. This wasn't just an economic reset. This was reality itself being offered a choice, to return to what was, or to become something new. And the decision point was that tiny flaw he'd left, that deliberate imperfection that made it neither perfect reset nor perfect chaos. The vortex above the anvil collapsed inward with a sound like a universe sighing. For one heartbeat, everything was still. Then the anvil exploded with light. Not outward, but inward, pulling everything toward it. The chamber, the protocol's fading form, even the light itself. Leo felt himself being dragged forward, his feet leaving the ground. Felix screamed something lost in the roar of collapsing dimensions. As the light consumed everything, Leo's last thought was of his village. Of the simple fence he'd tried to fix with a nail. Of the quiet retirement he'd wanted. Then the anvil glowed with chaotic energy so intense it threatened to unravel spacetime itself, and everything went white. The chamber trembled as if the very concept of stability had become a negotiable commodity. Leo stood before the anvil, his hands still tingling from the final hammer strike. What should have been a simple block of iron and steel now pulsed with an energy that seemed to breathe, a rhythmic glow that shifted between gold, silver, and the stark white of pure system code. The market oversight protocol, a shimmering hologram of charts, graphs, and floating equations, hovered nearby, its digital form flickering with each pulse from the anvil. It's stabilizing, Felix whispered from behind Leo, his economist's robes dusty from their dungeon crawl. The rogue economist had followed Leo this far, driven by equal parts curiosity and a desperate hope that someone might finally make sense of the world's economic madness. But it's not finished. Look. Leo did look. The anvil's surface wasn't solid metal anymore, it flowed like liquid mercury, yet held its shape. Etchings appeared and vanished, symbols of commerce, ancient runes of value, modern stock ticker codes, all swirling in a chaotic dance. Above it, words materialized in the air, glowing with the same unstable energy. Anvil of economic rebirth. Asterisk forged in the heart of system failure, this artifact offers a singular choice: reset all global markets to their pre-apocalypse equilibrium, purging all divine artisan creations from existence, or preserve the current chaotic state, allowing the divine artisan's aura to continue indefinitely. Warning, selection irrevocable, asterisk. Leo's breath caught. The chamber around them, a cavernous space lined with crystalline data nodes that had once hummed with system oversight, was crumbling. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, not from physical stress, but from reality itself fraying at the edges. Through the fractures, Leo glimpsed impossible scenes: a dragon weeping over a pile of worthless gems in one, a merchant frozen mid-scream in a halted marketplace in another, a demon general shaking a fist at a crashing stock ticker in a third. His creations had done this. His simple desire to fix a fence, cook soup, or carve a dagger had unraveled the world. Reset all markets, Felix murmured, his voice trembling with awe and fear. Leo, do you understand what that means? Every artifact you've made, the nail, the cauldron, the spoon, the sword, all gone. Poof. The enchanted construction industry would recover. Alchemists could sell potions again. Dragons, well, they'd have to find new hobbies. But the chaos would end. And my skill? Leo asked, though he already knew the answer. His hands, calloused from years of honest blacksmithing, felt oddly cold. The market oversight protocol shimmered, its voice a synthesized echo that seemed to come from everywhere. The divine artisan's aura is intrinsically linked to the system imbalance. A reset would sever that connection. You would retain your craftsmanship, but no longer would every item you touch ascend to world-tier status. You could be ordinary. Ordinary. The word hung in the air like a promise and a threat. Leo thought of his village, the quiet forge he dreamed of retiring to, the simple pleasure of shaping metal without worrying it might bankrupt a kingdom. But he also remembered the Dragon Emperor's tears, the alchemist's rage, the guild leader's greed, all because he tried to live quietly. If he kept his skill, even if he swore never to craft again, someone would always come knocking. The temptation to make just one more thing would always whisper in his ear. What happens if I choose to keep it? Leo said, his voice barely above the rumble of the crumbling chamber. The protocol flickered violently. Reality degradation accelerates. Within weeks, space-time fractures will become permanent. Markets will not merely crash, they will cease to function as concepts. Barter systems based on your artifacts will collapse into nothingness. The system apocalypse merger itself may unravel, separating Earth and the fantasy realm in a cataclysmic event that could destroy both. Your retirement would be brief, ending in annihilation. Felix grabbed Leo's arm. You have to reset it. Leo, I've studied economies my whole life, this isn't just about money. It's about meaning. Your creations gave value where none existed, but they took it from everywhere else. The world needs balance, not a god with a hammer. Leo pulled away, stepping closer to the anvil. Its glow reflected in his eyes, and for a moment, he saw not the artifact, but the memories it represented. The first nail, driven into his fence with a satisfying thunk, only to shimmer into the nail of unbreakable binding. The copper pot, bubbling with stew, transforming into the cauldron of infinite sustenance, as alchemists screamed outside. The spoon, crafted with leftover demon parts, becoming the spoon of Demon King's essence, and starting an economic war. Each one had been an accident, a twist of fate from a skill he never asked for. He thought of the people he'd met, not the guild leaders or the nobles, but the ordinary folks. The farmer who couldn't afford enchanted nails to rebuild his barn after the market crashed. The apprentice alchemist who lost her job because no one needed potions anymore. The dragon whelp who just wanted to play with shiny things, not understand hyperinflation. They hadn't asked for this chaos either. Ordinary, Leo whispered again. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from the anvil's surface. The energy pulsed, warm and inviting, like a forge fire on a cold day. But this fire could burn down the world. Make the choice, Leo, the protocol urged, its form beginning to destabilize. The system cannot hold much longer. The fractures are spreading. As if to emphasize the point, a large crack opened in the ceiling, and through it, Leo saw a vision of his village, his little forge, the cobblestone street, the fence he'd tried to fix. It was frozen, caught in the treaty of absolute stalemate he'd inadvertently created. A merchant was stuck mid-step, a chicken suspended in mid-air, all because of his peace treaty. He'd wanted to stop conflict, but he'd stopped life itself. That did it. The weight of it all, the absurdity, the guilt, the sheer exhaustion, settled on Leo's shoulders like a ton of iron ingots. He wasn't a hero or a calamity, he was a tired blacksmith who'd made a mess and needed to clean it up. "I choose reset," Leo said, his voice firm now. He didn't shout it, he simply stated it, as if ordering a batch of coal. The anvil's glow intensified, shifting to a pure, blinding white. The etchings on its surface solidified into a single, intricate symbol, a scale balanced over a hammer. The protocol's hologram bowed, a gesture of respect or perhaps relief. Acknowledged. Initiating global economic reset. All divine artisan artifacts will be de-rendered from reality. Divine artisan's aura, connection severed. Prepare for temporal displacement. What does that mean? Felix asked, backing away as the white light filled the chamber. It means we're going for a ride, Leo said, and before he could say more, the light consumed everything. It wasn't a flash so much as an immersion. Leo felt himself dissolving, not painfully, but like sand washed away by a tide. Visions rushed past him, the nail vanishing from his fence, the copper pot reverting to a simple cookpot in an alchemist's discarded pile, the spoon melting back into demon core fragments, the sword losing its glow in a guild vault. Markets unfroze, dragons rediscovered the joy of gold, demons retreated grumbling to their realms, and guild wars sputtered out as weapons became ordinary again. He saw it all in a kaleidoscope of moments, a reverse cascade of his accidental legacy. And through it, he felt the skill leave him. The divine artisan's aura, that constant hum in the back of his mind, the subtle knowledge that anything he crafted would become legendary, faded like a dying ember. For the first time since the system apocalypse, his hands felt truly his own. No cheat, no curse, just calluses and competence. Then, nothing. Leo woke with a start, his head pounding as if he'd been at the forge for 3 days straight. He was lying on something hard and familiar. Blinking, he pushed himself up and looked around. He was in his village forge. Not the dungeon chamber, not some guild hall, but his own small workshop. The morning sun streamed through the dusty windows, illuminating motes of floating ash. His anvil, the real one, a solid block of steel he'd bought from a scrap dealer, sat in the center, cold and unadorned. Tools hung neatly on the walls, hammers, tongs, files, all ordinary and well-worn. Outside, he could hear the normal sounds of village life, a cart creaking, chickens clucking, children laughing. Did it work? Leo muttered, standing up. His body ached, but it was the good ache of hard work, not the metaphysical fatigue of reality warping. He stumbled to the door and pushed it open. The village was normal. The fence he tried to fix months ago was still slightly crooked, held together with ordinary iron nails that showed rust. No shimmer of unbreakable binding. Down the street, the tavern's chimney smoked with the scent of simple stew, not the infinite sustenance of a legendary cauldron. A farmer waved at him, holding a plain wooden plow, no dimensional storage tents in sight. "Leo! You're awake," a voice called. It was old man Harlow, the village elder, hobbling over with a smile. "Slept in late, did you? I thought blacksmiths were early risers." Leo stared. "Harlow. What day is it?" "Market day, of course." "Well, tomorrow is. You've been cooped up in that forge for days, working on some big project. Wouldn't tell anyone what. Finally finished." Leo's mind raced. The reset had worked. It had not only undone his artifacts but seemingly rewound time, or at least edited memories. No one remembered the economic chaos, the guild wars, the dragon tears. To them, he was just Leo the village blacksmith, maybe a bit eccentric for working too hard. "Yeah," Leo said slowly, a grin spreading across his face. "Finished. Just a personal project." Good, Harlow said, clapping him on the shoulder. "We'll need you sharp for market day. Got a few tools that need mending." As Harlow shuffled away, Leo leaned against his doorframe, breathing in the crisp, ordinary air. No system alerts blared in his mind. No divine beings argued in his forge. No economists begged for market reform. He was free. He could retire now, truly retire. Just mend tools, maybe take up fishing, and nap in the afternoon sun. He went back inside, running a hand over his anvil. It felt solid, real, inert. No chaotic energy, no glowing choices. Just metal. He picked up a hammer, hefting it. It was a good hammer, balanced and worn smooth by use. He could craft with this, create simple things that would stay simple. The thought was so beautiful it almost hurt. For a week, Leo lived in blissful normalcy. He fixed a hinge for the tavern, sharpened a farmer's scythe, even made a new handle for Harlow's walking stick. Each time he worked, he waited for the telltale glow, the system notification, the absurd transformation. Nothing happened. His skill was gone. He was ordinary. On the 8th day, as Leo sat outside his forge, enjoying a midday nap in the sun, a shadow fell over him. He opened one eye to see Mrs. Gable, the farmer's wife, standing there with a worried expression. "Leo, sorry to bother you," she said, wringing her hands. "But our plow, the one you fixed last year, it's cracked again. The metal's brittle. Could you take a look? We've got planting season coming up." Leo sighed, but it was a contented sigh. This was the retirement he'd wanted, simple problems, simple fixes. "Sure, Mrs. Gable. Bring it by tomorrow morning." She beamed. "Oh, thank you. You're a lifesaver." After she left, Leo stretched and ambled into the forge. The broken plow was already leaning against the wall where she'd left it earlier. He examined it, a simple iron plowshare, cracked along the seam from hard use. An easy repair. He'd just need to heat it, hammer it back together, maybe add a reinforcing strip. He lit the forge fire, the coals glowing to life with a familiar warmth. As the metal heated, he gathered his tools, tongs, hammer, flux. The plowshare glowed orange, then yellow, ready for work. Leo reached out with his tongs to grip it, but as his fingers brushed the metal, something tingled. A faint, almost imperceptible glow emanated from his hands. Not the blazing light of the divine artisan's aura, but a soft shimmer, like moonlight on water. He froze, heart hammering against his ribs. No. It couldn't be. He pulled his hand back, and the glow faded. Must be his imagination, tired eyes from napping in the sun. Cautiously, he touched the plowshare again. The glow returned, stronger this time, spreading from his fingertips across the cracked iron. The metal began to change, not dramatically, but subtly, the crack sealing itself, the color deepening to a rich, lustrous black, and along the edge, a faint etching appeared, a tiny, stylized stalk of wheat. A system message popped into his vision, not with a blaring alert, but with a quiet, almost apologetic chime. Divine Artisan's aura, reactivating, new market anomaly in progress. Asterisk artifact detected, plowshare of perpetual harvest. Effect, any field tilled with this plow yields double crops without additional labor. Warning, may disrupt local agricultural economies, asterisk. Leo stared, his breath catching. The plowshare now gleamed with a soft, earthy light, the wheat etching glowing faintly. He looked at his hands, then at the forge, then out the window at the peaceful village. "Oh, come on," he whispered, a mix of dread and absurd laughter bubbling in his chest. He sighed, long and deep, and looked at the plowshare as it started to shimmer with legendary energy. Some retirements, it seemed, were harder to achieve than others. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Leo's forge, casting warm rectangles of light across the packed earth floor. For 7 days, the world had been blessedly, wonderfully ordinary. No divine contracts, no weeping dragon emperors, no system administrators materializing in showers of golden light. Just the simple, satisfying rhythm of a village blacksmith's life. Leo wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, examining the horseshoe he'd just finished. It was plain, functional iron, no glowing runes, no ominous hum of reality-bending power. Just a horseshoe. He quenched it in the water trough, watching steam rise in a satisfying hiss. 7 days, he thought, a slow smile spreading across his face. A whole week without accidentally collapsing a global market. The reset had worked. The anvil of economic rebirth had done exactly what it promised, wiping clean the economic chaos his divine artisan's aura had caused. All his world-tier artifacts had vanished, returned to whatever cosmic inventory system governed this merged reality. The nail of unbreakable binding was just a memory. The cauldron of infinite sustenance might as well have never existed. And most importantly, the skill itself, that cursed, overpowered blessing, had been severed from his soul. Or so he'd thought. Leo had woken up in his own bed a week ago, disoriented but relieved. The village of Oakhaven was exactly as he remembered it from before everything went mad, quiet, sleepy, blissfully unaware of economic apocalypses. Old man Higgins still complained about his rheumatism at the tavern. Children still chased chickens through the muddy streets. And when Leo had tentatively picked up his hammer that first morning, his hands had remained stubbornly, wonderfully normal. No golden glow. No system notifications. Just calloused palms and the satisfying weight of a proper tool. He'd spent the week doing exactly what he'd always wanted, basic repairs, simple commissions. A hinge for Widow Miller's gate. A set of fireplace tools for the tavern. Nothing fancy, nothing legendary. Just honest work that left his muscles aching in that good, tired way at the end of each day. Maybe this is it, Leo mused as he hung the finished horseshoe on a hook. Maybe I can actually retire. Just be Leo the blacksmith, not Leo the accidental economic terrorist. The thought was so sweet it almost hurt. He was just about to start on the next commission, a replacement latch for the cooper's workshop, when the forge door creaked open. Old man Higgins shuffled in, his weathered face creased with concern. "Morning, Leo," Higgins said, removing his worn cap. "Got a bit of a problem." Leo set down his hammer, wiping his hands on his leather apron. "What's wrong?" "It's the plow," Higgins said, wringing his cap in his hands. "Snapped clean through yesterday afternoon. Tried to patch it myself, but..." He shrugged helplessly. "You know I'm no good with metalwork." Leo nodded. Higgins's farm was one of the smaller ones on the village outskirts, but the old man depended on it. A broken plow this close to planting season could mean disaster. "Bring it in," Leo said, already moving to clear space on his workbench. "I'll see what I can do." Higgins's face brightened. "Bless you, Leo. I'll fetch it right away." While Higgins went to retrieve the broken implement, Leo prepared his forge. He pumped the bellows, watching the coals glow brighter with each push. The familiar rhythm was comforting, the hiss of air, the growing heat, the scent of coal smoke and hot metal. This was what he'd wanted all along. Not world-altering power, just this simple, tangible craft. Higgins returned a few minutes later, struggling under the weight of the plowshare. It was a simple design, a curved blade of iron mounted on a wooden frame, meant to turn the earth for planting. The break was clean, right through the thickest part of the metal where it attached to the frame. "Set it here," Leo said, indicating the cleared workbench. As Higgins heaved the broken plow onto the bench, Leo examined the fracture. It was a clean break, the metal showing the crystalline structure of poor-quality iron that had been worked too hard for too long. Nothing unusual. Nothing magical. Just a tool that had finally given out after years of honest service. "I can fix this," Leo said confidently. "It'll need to be reforged, melt it down and work it fresh. Might take most of the day." Higgins looked relieved. "However long it takes. I've got some coin saved." "Don't worry about payment," Leo said, waving a hand. "Consider it a neighborly favor." The truth was, after the economic reset, money had lost much of its meaning to Leo. What was coin compared to peace? Compared to not having alchemists screaming at your door or dragons threatening to melt your village? After Higgins left with profuse thanks, Leo set to work. He positioned the broken plowshare in the forge, watching as the heat began to soften the metal. The process was meditative, the glow of the coals, the dance of the flames, the gradual yielding of stubborn iron to heat and will. As he worked, Leo found himself thinking about the past week. The strange quiet that had settled over the world. The absence of system notifications that had once plagued his every waking moment. The way people looked at him now, just as a blacksmith, not as some kind of economic messiah or calamity. Maybe the system fixed itself, he murmured to the flames. Maybe whatever bug caused all this, it's patched now. The thought brought a profound sense of relief. For the first time since the system apocalypse had merged Earth with this fantasy realm, Leo felt like he could breathe. Like he could just be. When the metal was hot enough, glowing a bright orange, Leo pulled it from the forge with his tongs and laid it on the anvil. He raised his hammer, ready to begin the familiar dance of shaping and reforging. And that's when he felt it. A faint tingle in his palms. A warmth that had nothing to do with the heated metal. Leo froze, hammer poised mid-air. His breath caught in his throat. "No," he whispered. "Please, no." He looked down at his hands. For a moment, they looked normal, calloused, stained with soot, gripping the hammer handle with practiced ease. But then he saw it, the faintest golden glow, like sunlight filtering through morning mist, emanating from his skin where it touched the tool. It's just the heat, he told himself, voice trembling. Just the metal transferring warmth. That's all. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. This warmth was different. It came from within him, not from the forged iron. It was the same feeling he'd had when he'd crafted the nail of unbreakable binding. The same sensation that had preceded the creation of the cauldron of infinite sustenance. With shaking hands, Leo lowered the hammer. He set it carefully on the workbench, as if it might explode at any moment. Then he stared at the glowing plowshare on his anvil. The metal was changing. Not in the way heated metal normally changed, not just softening or glowing with heat. This was different. The iron was taking on a strange, almost liquid quality, shimmering with colors that shouldn't exist in simple worked metal. Hints of emerald green swirled through the orange glow. Flecks of silver light danced across its surface like stars in a night sky. No, 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 Leo breathed, backing away from the anvil. Not again. Please, not again. But the transformation continued. The broken edges of the plowshare began to knit themselves together, not through the normal process of forging, but as if reality itself was rewriting the metal's history. The join became seamless, perfect, as if the break had never occurred. And then the runes appeared. They etched themselves into the metal's surface, glowing with that same golden light that now pulsed from Leo's hands. Ancient, impossible symbols that seemed to shift and change even as he tried to focus on them. Symbols of growth, of abundance, of endless cycles. A system notification popped into existence before his eyes, glowing with ominous golden text. Divine Artisan's aura reactivating. Skill integration, 23%. Current craft, plowshare. Transformation in progress. Leo stared at the notification, his heart pounding against his ribs. The reset hadn't worked. Or rather, it had worked temporarily, but now the skill was coming back. Like a virus the system couldn't fully purge. Stop, he whispered to the air, to the system, to whatever cosmic force governed this madness. Just stop. But the transformation continued. The plowshare was no longer just a tool for turning earth. It was becoming something else. Something more. The notification updated. Transformation complete. Item created, plowshare of perpetual harvest. World tier artifact. Effect, any field tilled with this plow will yield perpetual, abundant crops without need for seed, season, or rest. Soil fertility becomes infinite within plowed area. Market impact analysis, agricultural commodities market collapse imminent. Grain prices projected to drop 99.7% within 24 hours. Famine relief industry obsolete. Seed merchants bankrupt. Fertilizer alchemists unemployed. New market anomaly in progress. Leo sank onto a nearby stool, his legs suddenly unable to support him. He stared at the plowshare, which now glowed with a soft, steady light. The runes pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The metal had taken on a strange, almost organic quality. It looked less like worked iron and more like something that had grown from the earth itself. Perpetual harvest, he murmured, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He could already see the consequences unfolding in his mind's eye. Farmers with fields that never needed to lie fallow. Grain silos overflowing with endless bounty. And then, the collapse. Why buy grain when you could grow infinite amounts with a single plow? Why develop new crop strains when the old ones produce perpetually? Why bother with irrigation, with pest control, with any of the careful balance of agriculture? The entire agricultural economy, already fragile after the system apocalypse, would shatter. And this time, it wouldn't be enchanted construction or alchemical potions. This would be food. The most basic necessity of life. A cold dread settled in Leo's stomach. The reset had been a temporary reprieve, nothing more. The skill, the curse, was still part of him. And it was waking up. The forge door creaked open again. Old man Higgins peered in, his face hopeful. How's it coming, Leo? I brought some lunch to share, thought you might be hungry. His voice trailed off as he saw the glowing plowshare on the anvil. His eyes widened, the basket of bread and cheese forgotten in his hands. By the gods, Higgins whispered. What have you done? Leo opened his mouth to explain, to apologize, to say something, anything, that might make sense of this. But before he could speak, another system notification appeared, this one flashing urgent red. Global alert, agricultural anomaly detected. Location, Oakhaven Village, Blacksmith's Forge. Threat level, catastrophic. All guilds alerted. Dragonflight Economic Council notified. System administrators dispatched. Higgins dropped the basket. The bread rolled across the dirt floor, coming to rest against the leg of the workbench. Leo, the old man said, his voice trembling. What's happening? But Leo couldn't answer. He was too busy watching the plowshare, which had begun to pulse with light in time with his own heartbeat. The glow from his hands had intensified, spreading up his arms now, tracing golden patterns beneath his skin. The skill wasn't just reactivating. It was integrating more deeply than ever before. As if the reset had been a system reboot, and now the bug, his divine artisan's aura, was loading with enhanced permissions. Outside, Leo could hear the first signs of commotion. Raised voices in the village square. The distant sound of galloping horses, too fast for normal travel, likely enchanted steeds. And high above, a shadow passed over the sun, too large to be any normal bird. They were coming. The guilds, the administrators, the economic powers that had hounded him before the reset. They'd felt the new anomaly, just as they'd felt all the others. Higgins backed toward the door, his face pale with terror. I should go, he stammered. Wait, Leo said, finding his voice at last. He stood, his legs still unsteady. Take it. Take the plowshare and hide it. Don't let anyone know you have it. But it's glowing. Higgins protested. It's not right, Leo. I know, Leo said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. But if they find it here, with me. He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen. The guilds would descend. The administrators would interrogate. The delicate piece of the past week would shatter like glass. Higgins hesitated, then nodded slowly. He approached the anvil cautiously, as if the glowing plowshare might bite him. When his hands closed around the wooden handle, still attached to the transformed metal, nothing happened. No glow transferred to him. No system notifications appeared in his vision. The effect was Leo's alone. The curse was his alone. Go, Leo said softly. Hide it somewhere no one will think to look. And Higgins. He met the old man's eyes. I'm sorry. Higgins didn't reply. He just hefted the plowshare, surprisingly light for its size now, and hurried out of the forge, casting one last terrified glance over his shoulder. Alone again, Leo looked at his hands. The golden glow was fading now that he wasn't touching the artifact, but it didn't disappear completely. A faint luminescence remained, like embers after a fire has mostly died. Another notification appeared, this one in calm blue text rather than alarming red or gold. Skill integration complete, 100%. Divine Artisan's aura fully restored. New feature unlocked, partial control. You may now consciously suppress artifact transformation for non-legendary crafts. Warning, suppression requires constant concentration. Failure may result in accidental world tier creation. Leo stared at the words. Partial control. The ability to suppress the transformations. It was something, a tiny thread of hope in the gathering darkness. But even as he processed this, more notifications began to appear. Market alerts. Guild deployment notices. System administrator ETA counters. The world was reacting to the new anomaly, and Oakhaven was about to become ground zero once again. Leo sank back onto the stool, his head in his hands. The week of peace was over. The retirement he dreamed of was slipping through his fingers like smoke. And worst of all, he knew this was only the beginning. The skill was back, stronger than ever. And if a simple plowshare repair could create the plowshare of perpetual harvest, what would happen when he inevitably needed to craft something else? The sound of horses grew louder, accompanied now by the clank of armor and the murmur of many voices. They were at the village gates. Leo took a deep breath, then another. He stood, squaring his shoulders. He was tired. So tired of being a calamity, a messiah, a problem to be solved. But he was also a blacksmith. And blacksmiths didn't run from their forges. He walked to the door of his workshop, pushing it open to face whatever was coming. The village square was already filling with people, not just villagers now, but men and women in guild colors, administrators in system-issue robes, and high above, the unmistakable silhouette of a dragon circling against the clouds. At the front of the gathering crowd stood a woman Leo recognized, Administrator Kayla, who had confronted him before the reset. Her expression was grim, but there was a strange sympathy in her eyes. "Leo," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. "We need to talk." He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. Looking past her, past the gathered guilds and system officials, his eyes found Old Man Higgins's farm on the distant hill. Somewhere up there, hidden in a barn or buried in a field, the plowshare of perpetual harvest was waiting. And with it, the collapse of an entire sector of the global economy. "Yeah," Leo said, his voice barely more than a whisper that somehow carried to every ear in the square. "I suppose we do." As he stepped out into the sunlight, his hands began to glow again, just a faint pulse, like a heartbeat no one could ignore. The skill was awake. And it was hungry. The morning sun cast long shadows across Oakhaven's central square, which had been transformed overnight into something resembling a royal court crossed with a corporate boardroom. Leo stood at the center of it all, leaning against his anvil which had been dragged from his forge for this occasion. He wore his usual leather apron, now slightly singed from yesterday's plow incident, and tried to ignore the dozen pairs of eyes watching his every twitch. To his left stood Administrator Kayla, her system interface glowing with diagnostic runes that flickered nervously whenever Leo moved his hands. To his right, the Dragon Emperor perched uncomfortably on a hastily constructed stone dais, his massive form causing the cobblestones to groan under his weight. Surrounding them in a semicircle were representatives of every major power Leo had inadvertently offended, the Merchants Guild Master with abacus beads clicking nervously between his fingers, the Alchemist Guild leader still clutching the now useless wand she'd threatened him with weeks ago, three-dimensional mages whose pockets occasionally spat out random objects, and even a demon general who had negotiated temporary truce terms just for this meeting. "Let me summarize the proposal," Kayla said, her voice amplified by a system enhancement that made it echo slightly in the crisp morning air. "Leo, known designation Divine Artisan, will agree to craft exactly one item per month under full supervision of a rotating council of representatives." She gestured to the assembled group. "In exchange, all parties agree to cease hostilities, withdraw surveillance, and allow him to live in retirement for the remaining 29 days of each month." "With safeguards," the Merchants Guild Master interjected, his jowls quivering. "The item must be pre-approved. Its materials must be certified non-market disruptive. Its intended function must be clearly documented." He produced a scroll that unfurled to reveal what looked like several hundred lines of legal text. "I've drafted the contract here." Leo sighed, the sound carrying more weariness than he'd intended. He'd spent the night hiding the plowshare of perpetual harvest in Old Man Higgins' root cellar, then negotiating with Kayla until dawn about how to prevent global famine from infinite wheat yields. His hands still tingled with the familiar, terrifying energy of his returning skill, the Divine Artisan's aura that now pulsed beneath his skin like a second heartbeat. "One item," Leo said, meeting each representative's eyes in turn. "Simple. Mundane. Something that won't crash your precious markets." He held up his hands, and the entire assembly flinched. "But I choose what it is. No pre-approval committees. No material restrictions. You want control. This is the only control you get, one item, my choice, once a month." The Dragon Emperor rumbled, a sound like grinding mountains. "And if your choice makes my hoard of 3 centuries collect dust again? Then you get to complain about it at next month's meeting," Leo said flatly. "But here's what I've learned, the more I try to make something harmless, the more the system twists it. Remember the meh sword?" He pointed at the Merchants Guild Master, who paled at the memory of the platinum crash. "You wanted balanced. I gave you balanced. And we all saw how that worked out." Kayla's interface flashed with new data. "System analysis suggests he's correct. The Divine Artisan's aura responds inversely to intentional restraint. When Leo attempts to craft something safe, the system compensates by overcharging its effects." She turned to the others. "His proposal has statistical merit. Complete creative freedom within the single-item constraint yields the highest probability of non-catastrophic outcomes." There was a long silence, broken only by the distant clucking of chickens and the nervous tapping of the alchemist's wand against her robe. Leo watched their faces, reading the calculations behind each expression. The Merchants Guild Master was weighing profit margins. The Dragon Emperor was mentally inventorying his treasure. The Demon General was probably considering whether eating Leo would violate the truce terms. Finally, the Alchemist Guild leader spoke, her voice tight. "One demonstration. Today. We see what you make under these terms." If it doesn't bankrupt another industry, we agree. Seconded, rumbled the Dragon Emperor. Thirded, said the Demon General, though no one had asked for thirds. Kayla nodded. The accord is tentatively accepted pending today's crafting. Leo, proceed. All eyes turned to him. Leo took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world's economy literally resting on his next actions. He'd planned this moment during the long night, turning over possibilities in his mind. A nail. Too reminiscent of the first disaster. A pot. The alchemists would riot. A coin. The dragons would panic. Then he remembered the spoon. Not the spoon of Demon King's essence, that had nearly started an interdimensional war, but a simple, ordinary spoon. The most harmless object he could imagine. Something so basic that even the system might struggle to make it world-shattering. Right, Leo said, moving to the small portable forge that had been set up in the square. One commemorative spoon. To mark this agreement. He selected materials carefully, not from his special stock, but from the ordinary supplies Kayla had provided for the demonstration. A lump of common steel. A bit of copper for decoration. No demon cores, no dragon scales, no enchanted alloys. Just metal. As he heated the steel in the forge, Leo became acutely aware of the silence around him. The Dragon Emperor had leaned forward, his massive head casting a shadow over the entire workspace. The Merchants Guild Master had produced a complex-looking device that seemed to be monitoring market fluctuations in real time. Kayla's interface was projecting holographic readouts that tracked energy signatures, probability matrices, and something labeled catastrophe potential. Don't overthink it, Leo whispered to himself, more prayer than instruction. Just a spoon. A normal, boring, utterly unremarkable spoon. He began to hammer the heated steel, the rhythmic clang echoing in the silent square. With each strike, he felt the divine artisan's aura stirring in his hands, that familiar, terrifying power that wanted to make everything legendary. He fought it down, focusing on the most basic blacksmithing techniques he knew. Shape the bowl. Form the handle. Keep it simple. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not from the forge's heat but from the concentration required to restrain his own power. It was like trying to write with his non-dominant hand while someone kept trying to shove a legendary quill into his grip. The steel seemed to fight him, wanting to become something more, to twist into impossible shapes or absorb ambient magic. Steady, Kayla murmured, her eyes fixed on her readouts. Energy levels are holding at baseline. No major fluctuations. Leo finished the basic shape and moved to the detailing work. He decided to add a simple pattern to the handle, just some cross-hatching for grip. As his engraving tool touched the metal, he felt the aura surge. No. He pulled back mentally, forcing the energy down. The pattern remained ordinary. Finally, he quenched the spoon in the water trough. Steam hissed upward in a cloud that momentarily obscured him from view. When it cleared, he held up the finished piece. It was a spoon. A perfectly ordinary-looking steel spoon with copper accents on the handle. No glowing runes. No pulsing energy. No system notifications popping up to declare it a world-tier artifact. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kayla's interface chimed. Analysis complete. Item designation, steel spoon with copper inlay. Quality, good. Enchantment level, none detected. Market impact probability, 0.3%. She looked up, her professional composure cracking for the first time Leo had ever seen. It's normal. The Merchants Guild Master snatched the spoon from Leo's hand, examining it with a jeweler's loupe. Standard steel composition. Basic craftsmanship. Decorative value minimal. He produced a small device that scanned the spoon. No hidden properties. No dimensional pockets. No reality warping capabilities. He sounded almost disappointed. Let me see, rumbled the Dragon Emperor. The guild master reluctantly handed over the spoon, which looked comically small in the dragon's claw. The emperor sniffed it, then tapped it against his talon. It doesn't even taste like treasure. It's a spoon, Leo said, unable to keep the defensive note from his voice. It's supposed to be for eating. Or stirring. Not for tasting. The alchemist guild leader took it next, running detection spells over it. No alchemical properties. Won't enhance potions. Won't purify ingredients. She handed it back to Leo. It's useless. It's balanced. Leo protested, though inwardly he felt a surge of triumph. He'd done it. He'd actually crafted something normal. That was the point, remember? No market crashes. No economic disasters. Just a spoon. Kayla was studying her readouts with intense focus. The system is registering it as a valid monthly craft. No anomalies detected. No follow-up crafting restrictions triggered. She looked at the assembled representatives. The accord stands. 1 item per month, Leo's choice, under supervision. There was a collective release of tension so palpable it felt like the square itself exhaled. The Merchants Guild master began calculating potential trade routes for Leo-approved items. The Dragon Emperor announced he was returning to his mountain to count his treasure, just to be sure. The Demon General vanished back through a shadow portal without another word. As the representatives dispersed, making plans for next month's rotation of supervisors, Kayla approached Leo. That was impressive restraint, she said quietly. The system logs show you actively suppressed the aura's effects at 17 separate points during the crafting process. Leo looked at the spoon in his hand. It felt cool and ordinary. I just kept thinking about retirement. 29 days of peace. That's worth 1 boring spoon a month. Don't get overconfident, Kayla warned, though her expression had softened slightly. The aura is still reactivated. The plowshare in Higgins' cellar is still a world-tier artifact. We've contained it for now, but... She trailed off, her interface flashing with some alert only she could see. Just be careful what you choose next month. I already know, Leo said, a slow smile spreading across his face as he imagined the coming weeks of uninterrupted naps, simple repairs, and not having to worry about global economics. Something even more harmless. That evening, as the last of the representatives departed Oakhaven, the village threw a small celebration in the square. Old Man Higgins produced a cask of ale he'd been saving. Neighbors brought food. Someone started playing a fiddle. For the first time in months, Leo felt something resembling peace. He sat at a rough wooden table, the commemorative spoon lying beside his tankard. The villagers kept coming by to look at it, marveling at its ordinariness as if it were the most extraordinary thing they'd ever seen. To the spoon. Higgins toasted, raising his mug. May all Leo's crafts be so wonderfully dull. The crowd cheered. Leo smiled and raised his own drink. As he did, his eyes fell on the spoon again. In the flickering torchlight, he could have sworn he saw the copper inlay gleam with a faint, almost imperceptible light. Probably just a trick of the fire, he told himself. But as the celebration wound down and villagers began drifting home, Leo found himself alone at the table. He picked up the spoon, turning it over in his hands. It felt exactly as it had before, cool, solid, ordinary. Next time, he whispered to himself, the words barely audible even in the quiet square, I'm making a napkin. Can't possibly mess that up. As if in response, the spoon twitched in his hand. Just once. A tiny, almost imperceptible vibration that lasted less than a second. Leo froze, his fingers tightening around the handle. He stared at it, waiting for another movement, for a glow, for a system notification that would shatter his hard-won peace. Nothing happened. The spoon lay still and ordinary in his palm. Must have been my imagination, he thought, though the thought lacked conviction. Or maybe I'm just tired. Too many long nights worrying about economic collapses. He slipped the spoon into his pocket and stood, stretching muscles sore from a day of tension and concentration. The moon was rising over Oakhaven, casting silver light on the now empty square. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. 29 days, he reminded himself as he walked toward his cottage. 29 days of peace before he had to do this again. But as he reached his door, his hand went to his pocket where the spoon rested. He could still feel that tiny vibration, like an echo of something waiting to awaken. Just a spoon, he murmured, pushing the door open. It's just a spoon. Behind him, in the dark pocket of his apron, the copper inlay on the spoon's handle glowed faintly for exactly 3 seconds before fading back to ordinary metal. It went entirely unnoticed.